to Chino's book actually, because the
So
last
what's up?
song.
Hold
My
on, we'll
bad.
get to that real quick, but we are live now. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Perspectives. This is our 71st interview in the series. My name is Holden Stefan Roy. Joining me tonight, as always, is my co-host and partner in crime in this, Mr. Flacco Bale, Liddy Bro Flacco,
Hey,
and we have
lady, bro.
one of the few people to return to the perspectives thing, because we did have a beautiful lengthy conversation that is available on this perspectives channel that you're watching this on right now, that you can go check out and get. I think it was close to 4 hours of context and history into the life of this interesting man. We have the legend himself.
Was that our longest interview ever?
I don't know, but it's definitely top five.
Like,
It's
top
definitely
five.
top five.
Top five, top five,
Can't.
top five.
Yeah,
That's a fact.
The
Mr.
legend,
CF.
what's
CF
good?
Constant Flow.
What is good? The child forsaken, constant flow, cosmic felon.
Let's
However it
go.
I
goes,
like Cosmic
we out
Felon.
here.
I like Cosmic Felon.
Yeah,
Cosmic Felon is some fly shit right there.
that is.
That's some, yo, I'm not just a felon on planet Earth. Know what I mean? That's some Silver Surfer shit.
Yeah, no, it's really great to have you back with us.
Word. Big
Oh,
facts.
you muted yourself right quick. It's all good. It happens. It's still the technology of the
You.
days. It's the live
Yeah,
experience. Welcome back, CF.
great to be
Um,
back. What's good?
so yeah, you were just as we were going into it, they were just listening to a little bit of stuff off of the most recent project they found on your Bandcamp, that demo tape, and you were talking about that as we were coming into it. So I feel like that could just be a good jumping off point to break into this conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. The last project that I dropped, well, I dropped around 7 projects in the span of 2 years, right? The first one was Jegna, then the Uninvited, then Nelohim, then I believe Asylum, uh, then the Funhouse, and after that, the Leper King, and then Surus, which is the last one. And Surus
No,
is
I
a
think I think to set off all these albums was the Billion Man Rebellion, correct?
Oh yeah, we had the
B-
BMR after I came
BMR.
off with Viper. Me and my friend Don Teak, we did 2 Billion Man
Right,
Rebellion albums. We got a
That
super
was when
lyrical
we
MC
interviewed
group.
you.
That's true. We was
right.
rocking off of I think we dropped the album called Static Files, produced by DJ Static, and then we moved on to something called Ghost Lineage, which was had a bunch of other different producers on it. It was all like put together and curated by like or organized by Don T, who's my partner in rhyme. So we did those 2 albums, and then from there I just started working with a bunch of other producers, such as the homie Speedy Beats, Sos, my bro Biko Mento, a couple of other heads, and then that's when I started doing these other albums. I got my own equipment, that's why I dead ass got my own little like Logic, Chaotica, iPod shit, microphone, a nice little
Let's
like
go.
booth, and I started just recording all my stuff. It was around the time when COVID, a lot of people we couldn't go to studios and shit like that. And now with the advance of like recording technology through the Zoom kind of generation and shit like that, I just started taking it upon myself to create content in my own house. And I've always been a creative motherfucker. So now that I got to the access to the resources to do so and people to engineer for me, that's when I started having like an explosion of just creating content, just constantly just coming out with shit. So that's when
Right.
me and I dropped all those. But the last joint, Surus, is a special album. Is with me and my homie Biko Mental. It was engineered by or mixed by Speedy. And the album cover is a telling tale because if you look at it, Surus is the name of the elephant for Hannibal Barker, right? His war elephant, the one that he went all the way to fuck to the Alps with to try to attack Rome, was named Surus. And so
Hmm.
in the beginning of the album, though, it's not a big war elephant. It's like a stuffed animal, right? And it's on the floor or it's on a on the surface, and I'm looking down on it on the ground, and I'm like, damn, what do I do now? You know what I'm saying? Sometimes like our road dogs, when they go, we got to carry on tradition without them. Just like Alexander the Great when he lost Bucephalus, right? I think that's what that was his war horse. I don't know if I got the name right, but you know what I mean. Or like DMX when he had Boomer tattooed on his arm for his dog. You know what I mean? So, oh, if my best friend dies, or a person like Chino XL, who I look up to as strong as a war elephant, passes away as well. What do we do? Do we sit there and like uh, and mourn
Hold
and just
up.
stay in the mourning process, or do we keep moving and fight in honor of them? And that's kind of what
Right.
Surus is like, right? It's not. It's about like moving forward. And even the title track, Surus, it talks about it. It says, I'm like, what do? You got to carry on tradition for those that are past, and then keep moving on in the spirit of the whatever war animal that they wore for you when they probably died in combat and shit like that. So through the album is like mad different like little takes, but it does end with a song called Chino's Book. And that song was created way before Chino XL passed away. And I sent it to him and he was like, that shit is dope. But then he passed he died like not too he died in I think I think I believe last year in summer.
Right.
So it was just like it was a fitting tribute for him. But then that segues into the actual album Chino's Book. And the idea behind Chino's Book is like, and mind you, this album came out way before, like, or this album was put together. Conceptually, because I always think about albums in terms of concepts. Way before I thought like
We
Chino, I
have that in
never in
common.
a million years would have thought Chino would pass away. Never.
Right.
Never
Never.
in a
Right.
million years. Because he was a larger than life figure. He was so strong. He was the Puerto Rican
So strong.
superhero. You know what I'm saying? So to
Yeah.
me, that was like the furthest thing that I was thinking about. And it's interesting how that conceptually this album was being formed. And then that last song was what it was. And then he actually did pass away. But I was the reason why it's called Chino's Book is because when I would be on tour with Chino, I would always ask him like, "Yo, who's the dopest MC? Like, if you had a book of LMCs, like, where would say who's in that book and how the fuck I could get in
I
that
could
book and this, that, and the third."
testify to the
You know what I'm
fact
saying?
that Legend, we spent a lot of time together during after pandemic. We first off, a little bit of background. Me and Legend worked together on occasion in the event production industry
Hell
Okay.
yeah,
for groundwork operations. Shouts out to groundwork. Shouts out to the big homie Aaron. Shouts out to
facts.
Iron Solomon. You know
Iron
what I mean?
Solomon.
And this is a company that is like, we built this company, right? Like this company was built on the backs of New York City underground indie rap uh rappers backs, like literally the first people that ever worked for the company were all like EO Dub friends and homies, and everybody was like homies with each other. At one point Nems worked with us, Swave
Hell
has
yeah.
worked with us,
Math.
Poison Pen, Math worked with us. Like
Yo, that's actually a
Yo,
pretty wild flex for a
Jay
company to
Smooth.
super,
have. You know
Jay
what I'm
Smooth
saying?
Jay
works
Like,
with us.
Smooth works with
Jay
a Jay
Smooth
Smooth from
works with us.
Underground Railroad. Yo, I was starstruck working with him that I got hit by mistake trying to because I'm out here talking to Jay Smooth and I had to help someone pick something up and I was so distracted by just like in awe of the fact that this is the guy and I've been on Jay Smooth show WBAI 99.5 but
that's a
y'all don't know like
blessing.
But still,
back in the days there was no Hot 97, bro. You had to listen to hip hop like for 4 hours on Kiss FM, Red Alert, and then if you turn the dial, you don't know like at 99.5 it's like just go, if you turn the dial to the right, it's right there. And on Tuesdays it's a come up. You'll be listening to like them breaking records, and that's the first time I heard the Wu-Tang Clan Protect Your Neck shit. First time. You know what I'm saying? Everybody was on the
word.
Bobito and Stretch Wave, but I was like, I was pulling out my WBAI Underground Railroad tape, so we was trading shit. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And I
Nah,
had
big facts. I
and
was also up on WBA on Underground Railroad. I shared just as much love for Stretch and Bob as I did for the Underground Railroad because 99.5, their antenna was stronger in the Bronx.
Oh shit, that is deep. Yeah, that because it was two way, and this is the beauty, and that's crazy that like the homie with the red hat right now, Trump they're about to try to MAGA out or trying to dub, a public, the PBS and things of that nature. But like through public radio is how we got put on to kind of hip hop. Through college radio is how we got put on to hip hop. These are currently two, I think, like uh things that are under attack right now. You know what I'm saying? But
Yes,
but it's
for
interesting.
sure.
Like we didn't have that before. Fuck, before the internet, there was none of that. That's why New York culture was intact. It was so different, and it was so in your face because you could see your heroes. But
Right.
groundworks, you see your heroes because dead ass the people that are recruited to work for groundworks, that work for the industry and the stagehand, they also are artists. So now look, I
Yeah.
just
Well,
got
Right.
in contact with Jay Smooth and I was like awestruck and I got hit in the head because some other dude was like, yo, help me out. So I'm trying to help the homie. You know what I'm saying? So shit was
you were in the
gangster
middle
as
of
fuck.
convo with Jay Smooth.
But
I mean, but yeah. So, but to put a thing in it. Me and Legend, after pandemic, we worked a lot together. A job that we did out in Jersey on Fort Dix, and I could tell you that Legend, Legend is always going to ask you hip hop questions, like unofficial hip hop interviewer, just chilling type person. You know what I mean? And we would be in the van with like eight other guys, and Legend would be like, "Yo, Legend, Nas or Jay Z?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, Nas or Jay Z? Like, what are we talking about? How so?" But like that one's a super lightweight one, right? Like he'd have like a million want to know my perspective on X X amount of like just hip hop questions. And so I already know if he's doing that with me, he's definitely doing that when he's out on tour with fucking Chino. You know what I'm saying? Like I can
yeah, hell.
only imagine,
It's like
you know what
a
I'm
little
saying?
quick
The
time with
the
slime in the car.
quick time with slime, but with the constant flow of the man who knows. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
we was asking all the
CF
time.
who always.
Yo,
And
we
so
be
yeah,
that's
it doesn't surprise me that you would have those type of in-depth conversations with um Chino XL.
Yeah, we would be doing this either on plane, either on train, either on boat type shit, or either within the sprinter vans or the tour buses that we were in and shit like that. So I've been a couple places in motion with Chino XL, either in the gym because we worked out together. Last time I saw him alive, where me and him were like chatting it up was in Mexico City because Tech invited me to do a show with them as an opening act for some battle that they had out there in Mexico City, and it was me, Chino XL, Southpaw's
Um
producer, Tech.
Was it like a Red Bull battle?
I don't know, yo. I dead ass thought that was some Mexican cartel shit that they hooked up, but I don't know, B. It was mad gangster like that. And I
That's
think,
dope. That's dope too, though. That's wild official because Mexican cartel gone. They put wild money in people's pockets. I know growers, weed growers in California that they were trying to lure into Mexico before pandemic to help them learn how to grow so that they're not growing the bunk ass bud that
yeah,
they used to grow. You know what I'm saying? And they wanted to get into like hydroponics and like
shit.
quality bud with everything. And they were like paying big money to Cali growers to come out there. And that's the cartels. Like people think that it's all, kill, fucking bad negative, but they don't realize how much money they put in the pockets of like artists, independent growers, independent business people. They're spreading money around. Like it's not all just fucking murdering rivals. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like there's positive shit too.
I don't know if that was spot. It just felt like it was, but I don't know if it
Right.
was. I know that we was there, and Tech always does business with legitimate heads and shit like that. But within the background of in that market, there's always You get what I mean? It's like whatever that
Yeah.
You
homies
can't
run
ever
shit.
really know.
You never know. But when we out there, we chilling, and I see Chino XL, and from what I saw, like he did look a little bit like, not that he aged, but he looked more tired than normal and shit like that. And I'm saying like I feel that now. 46, I feel tired and shit. I don't go to the gym and kill it like I used to and shit like that. But I just he just looked a bit tired, and we went to the gym and we talked or whatever. Very humble and shit. It was definitely like, what I'm saying, but not one of those like that God was telling me like I'm never gonna see the big bro again type shit. But then
Right.
fast forward like 3 years later, you know what I mean? Bro passed away. So I think it was in 2020 when I went to Mexico City. I believe either 2020 or no 2021. I think. I gotta think, but that's when we was out there and shit like that. So, but every time me and Chino been to Europe together, we've been through all over the United States together. Obviously, we went to Latin America together and shit. So, going to places with a legend like that who had access to so many different other legends and hip hop history, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna pick his brain here and there. I never asked him the Tupac question because I know people always ask him that shit, but I asked him other things. As then he's from Jersey, you know what I'm saying? I'm from Jersey. I'm from Jersey City. He's from the Bronx. My family came from the Bronx, from Castle Hill. You know what I'm saying? So it's like mad similarities. And the way I got put onto him was my boy Saya, rest in peace, my best friend who got me onto rhyming. He was taken away. He was murdered in '99. But he's the one that put me up onto Chino XL. Coincidentally, the same person that put me on to Tupac, because I was trying to dub Tupac when everybody was on that anybody who ain't from New York is on some Bama shit. He would tell me, nah, Tupac got an interesting history. He's a Black Panther. Coincidentally, Tupac's real father, biological father, Billy Garland, is from Jersey City and was a Black Panther from Jersey City. So there was an interesting take with Jersey, Pac, and Chino XL. But like 6 degrees of separation, I think that's the way it says. Like my boy V Gutter sister was had a baby with Chino XL's best friend. And Chino XL ended up being the godfather of that baby. So I was always kind of known about Chino XL.
Word.
And then when we go on tour, we'd be like, yeah, V got it. And it got even more tighter. You know what I'm saying? Like that shit
Right.
was some destiny shit. Dead ass.
Word.
But my best friend Saya never got to see Chino XL because he was, unfortunately, his life was snuffed, you know what I'm saying, taken away abruptly. But I was able to live my boy's dreams, I was able to live his dreams through my shit, my experiences or whatever. And that made it even more interesting because I'm like, this is some destiny shit. So I gotta like pick Chino XL's brain and this, that, and the third. So I would ask him like, yo, who the illest MC? Who's this, that, and the third? And he would tell me that there was some sort of writers guild that he and like Royce the Five and the fuck is, I can't believe who's the homie from the Lupe Fiasco and a couple other heads and shit, that they had like a little writers guild they would together. And I was like, damn, how the fuck can I get into that? Like, how can I be one of them dudes? Like, I worked all my way up, and now I'm in a place with Chino XL. I've been on like Bobito and Stretch. I've been on the Underground Railroad shit. Did the Tim Westwood shit. Rocked everywhere. You know what I'm saying? With legends and shit like that. And now I'm out here with the legend that I never thought that I would be able to see a fucking inspiration. And so I asked him that, yo, you know what the illest shit that he told me one day? He's like, you know what was one of the dopest MCs in my book? And I'm like, besides Coogee Rap and all that, I'm like, who? Besides Tretch. He's like, Willie D from Ghetto Boys. And I'm like, Willie D, the fuck? But then you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, but then it shows
Makes
me
sense.
like, but like that's how Chino was. He's like, nah, it ain't about if you the dopest though. Like, yeah, that's part of that, but that ain't the only people that make the book. Like, there's people out there that have, and that's when I was like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like Chino's perspective is a little bit different. It ain't the way how I thought it was. It ain't the way how I was thinking that you had to be the ultimate super top lyricist and some metaphors and similes and all this other shit. Nah, yo, there's that other range in there too of just realism and just like down to earth shit, and that's that Jersey in him. And that's that Bronx in him. You know what I'm saying? Bringing it back down to earth and shit like that. So I was just
Yeah, I
like, yo,
mean,
there's
listen, Scarface to me is one of the greatest of all time. You know what I'm saying?
that
And
that's dead
I
ass. And
was
but
just last week we were talking. I was talking on the show about doing like I think that's something that you and me have in common when it comes to like concept. Like I have a concept behind every project that I do. Every project that I put together has like an underlying story behind it, and it has something that's a glue that's keeping everything together. And I was talking to Holden about that, about like how every single project there is like a story behind it. And there's somebody in our chat today who's almost always around. Shouts out to Lindell. He said, hi there. He mentioned Chino. Lindell was asking, who are my favorite storytelling MCs. And I was just like, yo, you know, all the all the all the legendary storytelling guys are my favorite guys, right? Like Slick Rick was the first storyteller that I ever got into. You know what I'm saying? But then, I got into rapping because of Biggie, and Biggie was a super storyteller. Ghostface Killer's an amazing storyteller. But really, like also, Scarface is an amazing storyteller. Like people don't understand and realize like the amount of like storytelling that like Scarface would do in his shit. And so, Willie D also is a part of that. The Ghetto Boys were storytellers, all of them together. You know what I mean? Their first joint, My Mind Playing Tricks on Me, is a story. You know what I'm saying? Um, so like I just think that it's one of those things where it's just like it depends, right? What we're talking about when we talk about an MC's greatness. But there's many things that can make up the DNA of the greatest MCs. You know what I'm saying? And I think that Willie D definitely has some of that,
that's
genetic
yeah,
makeup in him too.
yeah. I think when he told me that, then the fact that Willie D's an actual boxer. Remember he fought Melly Mel and shit like that when they had that boxing match and he beat him and shit
Yeah,
soundly. The fact
I
that
just
now
met.
yeah,
I just
yeah, I
saw
saw,
Melly
I
Mel
saw,
this
I
weekend.
saw you
This
was
weekend,
with Melly Mel. That's a legend too. Like, and
yeah.
then the fact that he does his podcast now, and just that he had a different perspective, and it was just a throw off from what I would normally think, because we get hyped up on what we think our heroes think, right? And then
Right.
recently I saw an
Right.
interview with Chino XL talking about that in East Orange it was a heavy like God body kind of presence during that time growing up. And there was this one guy who, and he mentioned, coincidentally, I might end up using that as an excerpt about a book, like the book of the lessons that they have. He had a big book, right? And he asked him like, yo man, like why is it that you don't like my shit all the time? Why is it that you don't get? He's like, yo, listen, young blood, it's not about that. I don't like, you could rap, but and you could be the nicest rapper, but what are you doing for the future you? And I'm like, what? And even Chino was like taken aback from when in the interview when I was saying that. He's like, what are you doing for the Chino XLs that look up to you? You know what I'm saying? Are you speaking to them, that future generation of others that, because you got the arrogance and all this about you and the air of that you're the best MC and all the superiority shit. But what about you speaking to the future generations of the yous that didn't have a you to look up to? And I was like, oh shit, and that's kind of like what Chino's book is about too. Cause in the song, I got a song named Chino's Book, and Chino, instead of like giving me a book of all the shit that he got, he gives me a empty book, like one of those composition books, and he's like, this this is your book. It's not Chino's book. You write your own story. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Not my story. Like you were so up into my story. I want you to do your own story. And that's what Chino's book is about. It's like you think that this, that, and the third, and you up there, and remember they say don't pay no attention to the man behind the mirror, I mean the man behind the curtain and shit like that, and the Wizard of Oz and all that. He's like, yo, listen, man, I'm down to earth, I'm for Jers like you. All this other shit is an allure. I know the game. This book I'm giving to you is, you look at it, you open it, you think it's all his shit, and there's nothing in it. It's blank. And you got to start writing your own stories. And that's what it taught me. Me having contact with Chino XL, knowing who he was, that it's not about the flash and all this shit. It's really about me learning myself to interacting with him, and that him finally being what that God body told him. Like, are you talking for the future Chinos or for the future yous? And that's what Chino's book meant to me. That he was talking like that. That he learned from that God body. And that
Word.
inspired me. You get what I
So
mean?
let me ask you something, Legend. So do you have any like young you that you picked to feature on this album?
That's an interesting question because I really don't have a lot of oddly enough, Chino's book has no features. Like when I was
Word.
going through doing Chino's book, I've been sparingly just trying to just surviving writing. Like when we worked that stagehand gig, I got my regular job. I was fighting my regular job because I work in a politicized situation, a lot of nepotism and cronyism. When I mentioned that, they try to send cops to my house, all types of shit. So I had to
We're
fight
gonna talk
them,
about that.
then ally myself with the union because my position was a union. So I was fighting them, but at the same time trying to continue the music because the in underground hip hop, what we do in New York is way different. A lot of people don't understand that underground hip hop in New York now is tied in with workers' rights, like specifically what we do in stagehand. Like we embedded in the workforce. Like we not far removed from it. We not going on tours, getting caught up with the life of, this, that, and the third. When we go on stage and we see that the lighting is good, the sound is good, since we work at that capacity doing
Right.
that stagehand shit, we appreciate these people because
Right.
we do the same shit.
Right.
So we
Absolutely.
embedded with these people. And that's
Yeah.
another aspect of like Chino's book and shit like that. But I didn't, interesting enough, oddly enough, I did
I mean,
not get any feature. And I didn't think about that. I did not, me thinking
is
about
it
that now, I didn't think about that.
is it completed? Is it like already scheduled? Like, is it already on
Yeah.
the? Did you already upload it to whatever distribution you use to
Yeah.
distribute
I,
your project? So,
I got it currently on the cusp of getting uploaded for that distribution and to be put on Bandcamp. I just got one joint. I did this joint called Gafre. You know how New Yorkers like they look at us from Puerto Ricans look at us New Yorkers, which ties into the show that we're gonna have on the 6th, right? Because it's about
hmm
Puerto Ricans in New York City specifically, because that's a whole different type of cultural phenomenon on itself. Since we are also like one of the contributors or had a presence during the creation of hip hop, right? Which makes us a little bit different than other Puerto Rican groups within the diaspora, which is like that. So they look at us like we like not them, like not y'all other, like y'all FBA, but FBA look at us like we Germans and shit like that. So we trying to find out who we are, and so they started in Puerto Rico. They would call us cafre, which means like you like a ghetto, like the worst, like y'all look at the way y'all is, da 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 da, caserio type shit. And so I made a song called Cafre and I adapted it to a salsa, to an actual salsa song, because oddly enough, salsa, that Afro-Cuban musical form was the reason salsa came about is because of our interpretation of those Afro-Cuban rhythms in New York City. That's how that came about. Because there's an experience that Puerto Ricans have in New York that other people ain't having. Because them Cuban homies, even though they did all that rumba shit and all that, they wasn't writing no like Juanito Alemania, or they wasn't talking about ghetto shit. Like the shit that we saw in New York, we started bringing that shit to Puerto Rico, and then we started writing songs about it. And that's pre-hip hop shit. You know what Nas
yeah.
talks about in his shit? We was talking about that, but on drums. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
like, so they try, and the Puerto Rican flag was made. The flag that they modeled after the Cuban flag, though, was created here by the exiled Puerto Rican community in New York City before the Spanish-American War as solidarity to them. So the flag that they waving, the flag you see on your hat, that was
Yep.
created in New York.
Yeah.
So I was like, the shit that you talking about, there's mad holes in your story. Like we had a lot to do with the development of Ya. And now you saying we know, and I'm saying this because even though I'm from Jersey, my family came from New York.
Is this like
They came
a present day thing, or is this more of or
I
like
mean,
it's
there's
kind of
always
over time, like,
there's
or is it like
always
See, this is
It's
this
always
time.
Is it
been
more subtle or flagrant? Like I don't
Nah,
know.
nah.
Like for me, it's like
This is
it's a bit of an
this.
outsider situation.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you
always
asked that, because now
what.
it ties into the show. It ties in now that the Puerto Rican parade is gonna happen in New York City. Like, that day is coming up soon, it's celebratory and shit like that. And this is not something that's recent. This is something that's been going on for quite some time. And the more that we're removed from living on the island, the more we get ostracized or told we this by that, and not by all Puerto Ricans, but there are some people that be like, you can't speak Spanish, so you're not Puerto Rican, or this, that, and the third. And to me, like, the Tainos didn't speak Spanish, so why would it matter?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It
Like,
doesn't. I definitely don't look at Spanish as any like that's a colonizer's language. That's not what we spoke as a people. When
that's sort of
I often tell people when I look at have you ever seen when the Maori people, like the people that the rock comes from, when they do the
yeah, hell yeah.
haka,
In New
when they like
Zealand,
when the New
yeah.
Zealanders when they do the haka together, the first time I ever saw somebody doing the haka, bro, I almost cried, bro, because I was like, damn, yo, that's what my people didn't do that exactly, but they did something like that before the Spanish came and colonized us, yo. You know what I mean? We didn't speak Spanish. We didn't worship Jesus Christ. We didn't worship one God. We worshiped many gods, and we spoke the Taino language, the language that Tainos would speak amongst each other, and Borinquen. And I'm pretty sure that there were many different forms of dialect across all the islands that make up Borinquen. You know what I'm saying?
Nah, that is
So
100%. Like, that shit is,
so
everything you
it's one
said
of
is
those
right.
things where like, yo, it's sad. You know what I mean? Like, it hurts just to look at, because it's just like, fuck, I know for a fact that's what we were doing. You know what I mean? But our shit is lost in time, and it's lost to the colonization that we went through at the hands of the Spanish. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So like, it's
So
but the
it's
point
effectively just to
to
like
reinforce
wrap.
what CF is saying, um, we like speaking Spanish doesn't make you any more Puerto Rican or less Puerto Rican. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's just
Yeah.
same as I could never. I'm pretty sure if Tupac was still alive at this point in his life, he would fight anybody who would tell him he's not a New Yorker. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, what do you mean? I was born there. I was born there and I was raised there up until the age of X, Y, and Z. You can't take away people's. My wife has been living with me in the Bronx for the last 20 going on 21 years this year. And I constantly joke with her that she's not from Brooklyn no more. But you could never take away her Brooklyn.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, you could never take away. And so, same thing with us being Puerto Rican. Like, we weren't raised on the island of Puerto Rico, but that doesn't make us any less Puerto Rican
So,
than Puerto Ricans on the
Yeah.
island
I
of Puerto
mean,
Rico. But
right.
yeah,
So
absolutely,
to
there
like
is some headbutting. But even Bad Bunny talked about this
correct.
on his last album, and in many interviews, where he doesn't feel that way, and he shows a lot of love to New York. He shot videos on my block. He shot a video on my block for one of those. Si me quiero divertir. Oh no, no, not Nueva York. I forgot the name of the other song, but it was like a couple albums ago when he came to Yankee Stadium for the show. That album, he recorded a video right here on my block, and for him to be on my block, which is like a super gang affiliated block, drill. It's all over the like the drill channels on YouTube, all the drill channels on YouTube that talk about the drilling shit that's happening in the Bronx. My block is like one of the premier three neighborhoods that they cover when it comes to all this shit. So for Bad Bunny to be out here and shooting music videos out here, that means he's in touch. He's in touch with the soil of people in the Bronx. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
again, it's one of those things where like CF is absolutely right. There
so
are some Puerto Ricans that treat us a certain way, but then there's also a bunch that know what time it is, and there's a bunch
So,
of
so if I can
brotherhood
just
that
ask like a metaphor, like a parallel question, just to make sure making sure I'm following it all.
Yeah,
The way you're describing it is very similar to what the indigenous people went through over here, just with different colonizers and the different cultural identities. But like in the sense that right now, there's a lot of people who, like especially in Canada, were abducted when they were kids and they were forced into the more whitewashed
yeah.
version of it. But now, when they go back to the reservations and stuff, there's a lot of conflict because they don't know the language. They don't necessarily know the local culture. They basically grew up in places like Montreal, Toronto, etc., and are Canadian as far as everything's concerned. And then there's a lot of conflict within the community based on that, because there's a bunch of people who aren't in touch, and the people who grew up on the reservations kind of make them feel like outcasts, like they don't belong. Like there's almost tension when they go because they are from a different place. So it's kind of like, to me, sounds something similar to that in terms of, it's not necessarily all out resentment, but just a divide that
There,
exists.
100%. And it's glad that you tap into that, because with our Canadian brothers and sisters and all natives throughout the Americas, like we're all connected. We all probably traveled a small group of us, or many groups in different waves, came from that Bering Strait through Siberia all the way over here, probably 20,000 years ago, Fort Willie Mammoths and all that shit. So you know what I mean? Like it's a continuation of that history, unfortunately with a different language and different looking people, because now there's more genetic diversity amongst us, because especially in the Caribbean, with the black West Africans who were imported as slaves, the European, the Sephardic Jewish, the converso types, the freaking Canary Islanders from North Africa, and then fused with the natives. So it makes us different natives in this day and age. But there's that continuum, you know what I'm saying? And that's what I think.
the blood is still there though.
The blood is still there. It's still 20,000 years deep. The United States could exist for 250 years. It's still past, and this blood will still be here because it's been here for that
Facts.
long amount of time. But I mean, like, but but even with the Spanish conquistador and all that shit, that's a mixed bag too. Cause them people, they just found out Columbus was Jewish and shit like that. So you know what I mean? Those people on them boats,
Really?
that was a mixed bag. Yeah, yeah. They just found out he was Sephardic Jewish and shit like that. So and it
Not
and it
surprising.
makes sense because of the fact
Makes
that
sense.
it makes sense because of the fact the Spanish Inquisition and the last fall of Granada coincidentally was at the time of the voyage of Columbus's voyage, to him taking that shortcut to get to India, but then ends up in what they quote unquote the New World, right? The Americas or whatnot. That's why they called the Indians Indians and things of that nature, because they probably confused them thinking they weren't actually in India. But there were a couple of those people in there that were just, Moors that were forcefully converted to Catholicism, Jews that were forcefully converted to Catholicism as conversos, people from the northern parts of the kingdom of Castile and all that stuff, white European, whatever, and black West African mercenaries like Wangarido and shit like that. People won't tell you that, but it was a mixed bag. The Tainos did not just see one group of people. They saw many different groups of people
Many.
on that
Right.
one boat, and they were like, they just know that these are just invaders, or they didn't initially think they were invaders. They thought they were different types of people. Then they kind of found out through conquest and all the other shit and diseases, because diseases is the byproduct that led to this, genocide. Probably people were just dying more by diseases than by actually being killed. But that's a story for another day, right? That needs to be investigated thoroughly. They need to find out exactly what parties were involved, what happened, because it's a human story, right? Because human beings, wherever they interact, I'm sure when Homo sapiens were interacting with Neanderthals, it was never cozy. It was probably always war. We come from, I think the origins of humanity is based on war and shit like that for many, wherever we are at. So it is what it is. And the Tainos was also fighting against the Caribs. So it's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of deep layers to this shit. This shit's got a lot of texture. But that legacy of caciqueism and power and that's something that a guy like Chino XL was bringing to the forefront. He was a representative of that. You know what I'm saying? That essence,
Right.
that power, that history. And that's what I try to capture on this project. And that song specifically, the reason why I did that God for this stuff, because a person like Chino XL and myself, and even like, you know what I'm saying, Dutch or any other Puerto Rican that's in from New York or the New York City area, the way we talk, they'll negate all that history and combination of what we are and be like, you different from us. Like if we didn't experience the same shit for them
Yeah,
500 years. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
right.
not in our blood and shit like that. And no victim shit, no woke shit. I'm just saying that this is real human shit. This is just human shit. You know what I mean? And there's always a disconnect between people's when others go out and migrate outside of where they at, not because they wanted to, probably they were forcefully. I think Operation Bootstrap pushed people from the agriculture to the manufacturing. And I think the United States says in order for us to crush poverty all the way, 1 million of y'all motherfuckers gotta leave. And so 1 million of us did leave. And that's where we ended up here. But now if you look, Puerto Rico has been hit with because it's still in a colonial status, the Commonwealth shit and all that shit is just a weird political purgatory, right? But there's still there was a mass exodus of Puerto Ricans just recently, right? Because the economy was failing. You had the hurricane, you had earthquakes, you had like the power outages and shit like
My
that.
father had to drive. I think we talked about this like wait on your last interview, but my father's home was located in a part of Puerto Rico where he was fortunate and the hurricane didn't wash away his home, right? But he had brothers, uncles of mine that, I'm pretty sure he has a little bit of survivor's remorse, because he had to drive my uncles, his brothers, to the airport so that they could make their way back to Philadelphia, back to Camden, after they worked their whole lives to like be able to afford property in Puerto Rico and buy a piece of land.
Yeah,
They had to then move back to where they came from, Philadelphia, Camden, New York, New Jersey, to um, start all over again because the hurricane just washed away everything that they had, their homes and everything. You know what I mean?
that's
So
crazy.
it's one of those things where like there were a lot of it was almost like a second mass exodus, and believed that white people were ready to take advantage of that. That was exactly when um,
Mm.
the Paul brothers and many white people in the States went and bought up property in Puerto Rico, and they haven't stopped buying up property in Puerto
Yo, I
Rico
tell you,
that helped what they did in Rincon, which is kind of like just took over the whole city. Like it was like they literally communicated with each other, like, oh, go to Rincon, buy a property in Rincon, and now Rincon is like mostly white people that have bought up property, and now they are selling their own little trinkets and things in the
yeah.
town square. And it's just like, well, you don't need to sell, like you can afford to live here without selling Puerto Rico blankets, or you know what I mean,
Yo,
like,
I
or,
see. I went.
That's wild,
hats
actually.
and t-shirts,
I
and
went
it's
to Puerto.
crazy.
I went to Puerto Rico recently because my friend had a wedding there. And mind you, I could not like. I
we
went
were
to
we
the
were right behind each other.
yeah yeah
You went in late March, right?
yeah
Or
because I went. Yo, I had like I was like basically the designated driver for my friends that was blasted and shit. Cause um my boy Lou, he was getting married. That's my best friend, and coincidentally, Speedy Beats, who makes my beats or whatever, he's just a phenomenal producer and a person that does engineering and mix it for me and videos. This motherfucker's like one style and album covers. He's Lou's brother, so I'm out there with Speedy and shit. Speedy getting wild drunk, and I had to be the designated driver. Shit, I was flipping because I didn't want to. I want to enjoy myself. Like I go there to be about culture, but this was for a different event, and this was for my friend. But I did notice like some key things, like when we went to Luquillo, we went to some spot called La Parella, some shit like that. It's like seafood spot. But we coming on to some New Yorican, like now I'm saying we coming on some God for that shit, cause we come late. Yo, son, the joint's about to like the kitchen's closing at 10. We there at 9:45 type shit, right? But we went in to visit somebody else, so they straight on some like New Yorican, like guepa, like wild loud and shit like that. And I'm on some on like I can see why people think of us like this. We just a lively, vibrant Caribbean carnival like people. So wild personality. So we get up in there, and in the beginning, the servers were apprehensive, and these are Afro Puerto Ricans. Like a lot of people on the north side of the island are black Puerto Ricans and shit like that. Many moons
Black Puerto
ago,
Ricans,
a
facts.
lot of their descendants came from like the I think it's the Danish speaking or the Danish Virgin Islands, I believe. I think that because like Saint Thomas and uh those islands that are up there, like Saint Croix.
St. Croix,
Yeah, so the Spanish
St. Lucia,
crown,
right?
they gave these people like if you settle in this part of the island, we'll give you your freedom. You could escape the slavery from there, come here, and then we'll give you your freedom, and then you could settle this area, just protect this area from invading pirates and shit like that. And so they created their own like maroon-like community, and this was in the I guess it's it's called San Mateo de Cangrejos, but now they call it Santurce. But in that area has always been an influx of, even though Puerto Rico has many different African types that came in there, and that's all in our bloodline and shit, this particular region always had like a large black presence and shit, right? Of people
Also,
that were,
that's the area that a lot of the African enslaved that was brought to the
yeah,
island when because let's get it right, right? Like make sure that we mention that yo, there's always gonna be rebellion. There's always
a
gonna be
hundred
somebody.
percent,
There's always gonna be somebody. You could have if you got 200 enslaved people with you, I'll promise you 20 of those people are gonna fight for their freedom to their death. They will jump off of boats into their death in the ocean. They will escape at every fucking turn. And in Puerto Rico, there were enslaved Africans that would escape into the mountains,
mountains, correct, and
and,
then they
and they would
create
and
their
they would
own.
and they would also intermingle, and that's why I tell people all the time, right? That what do you call it? Enslaved in what do you call it? People who are not only just enslaved but
Oppressed,
marginalized and
oppressed,
oppressed
yeah,
people always see eye to eye with each other. And when you're an oppressed person, you gonna see eye to eye with the next oppressed person. I was just talking with an Irish person, a North Irish person, who says that they consider where they live, that's occupied Ireland, because that's one of the lands that is still under
yeah,
British rule,
like
and
Northern Ireland, yeah,
Northern Ireland, yeah, and they
yeah,
consider themselves living in occupied Ireland, and so
Belfast and
that
shit.
would be the same thing. That would be the same thing as right us when we empathize with the Palestinian struggle, right? It's just you see another fellow person that's being marginalized and oppressed, and marginalized and oppressed people tend to see eye to eye with each other and
Solidarity,
get
yeah.
along very well in solidarity.
So
So there's a mixture of all sorts of black people that were commingling on that northern part of Puerto
correct.
Rico. That
It
is what caused there to be still a strong black presence to
presence,
this day on that in that part. I
correct.
mean, all over the island, but
That's
in
true.
particularly
In that
that part of the
area,
island.
yeah, yeah, because
That
all over the island there's different type of Africans that came in. You know, you in Mayagüez, you got people that came in from Haiti after Haiti took over all of Española for 22 years. The French, when they left, they went to lands that they can, you know, find cheaper to cultivate coffee or sugarcane. So they went to Eastern Cuba, they went to Western Puerto Rico, and they went to New Orleans. Then you had like Barbados and people like that, or the English speaking black people that came to the islands to cut sugarcane, and we called them, or the term for them in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean is cocolos. You know what I mean? People didn't know that and shit like that. So they came
which
and they went through
which
their
black
areas.
which black Americans have misinterpreted. There's been a lot of misinterpretation,
But
especially as the FBA and Puerto Rican factions have started warring on the internet in the last
yeah,
few years.
so there's been an
Um,
evolution of this shit. But like when I was out there at that spot, like I knew the history very well about this particular spot in like the area and Santurce and even Loíza and Carolina and all this place. So you know what I mean? I'm really big on like bomba and Afro Puerto Rican music and shit like that. But it was interesting because these people initially when they started finding out, oh y'all Puerto Ricans, y'all not Americans, y'all not gringos, like you part of us. You just from a different place, but you got that vibrant personality. Now there was this white lady, this Anglo lady, and she got up before she was gonna leave and exit, right? Because these people made an exception for us. The servers, they didn't have to serve us. But then they found out that, oh, y'all Puerto Ricans from out there, you know, say solidarity shit, right? But the lady was like, you know, there are other people here. You guys are talking real loud, right? Yo, and I'm like, wait a second, yo, who the fuck is this bitch from Ohio telling me like, but then again, I'm like, nah, she probably right. We acting the fuck up. But then fuck that. This is our shit. So I'm like
If your
going through this
shit, you can
conflict.
act up all
Yo,
the fuck
dead
you want.
but I
You
was
got
already,
home. You're home. You're
I was
home.
at
Of
odds.
course they're gonna be loud.
I was at
Yeah.
odds with the people that I was with because I'm like, yo, y'all getting too, y'all acting wild Jersey City right now in Puerto Rico. Like, we out here like disgracing the motherland type shit. But then after that lady said, I'm like,
Nah.
nah, fuck that. Now we all riding together type shit. So, but that shows you the phenomenon that's going on in Puerto Rico. That lady was not a tourist. She just a recent moved there, probably a transplant, and now she's
She's a
seeing that.
gentrifier.
Yeah, basically,
She's
it's
a
like, you know,
gentrifier.
so
Yeah, because that's gentrification.
she saw it like, yo, you know what, like, you rabbling up the local Puerto Ricans, like, nah, keep that shit, like, keep y'all got for that shit over there. That, you know what I'm saying? Because you gonna make it difficult for me to be having a presence here, and then bring more of my people so we can have a bigger presence here and change the whole dynamic of what the island is about in a weird ass way. So I was just like, yo, that was something
Actually, you
that.
bring that, you make up a really valid threat because I mean, I got real into local politics over the last couple of years. So just think about like homeowners associations and the way that neighborhoods actually shift at like a bylaw level. So what'll happen is a bunch of the white ladies show up, they own enough property, now they start getting invested in local politics, probably because they're rich and bored. So they actually have time
Yeah.
to canvas and do all this extra stuff, which will mean that 10, 15 years from now, when they have a majority in that area, all of a sudden there's curfews, there's noise complaints, maybe you can't drink in public anymore.
It's
Maybe you
what we're all
can't do
dealing
these
with in New
little...
York City, and what Legend CF is dealing with in Jersey City. Because let's be specific. That's why I constantly say that I'm willing to trade Staten Island for Jersey City, because I feel like Jersey City should be the fifth borough more than Staten Island should be the fifth borough. No disrespect to Staten Island, but all the disrespect to Staten Island. But the point being is that Jersey City has been heavily gentrified, heavily gentrified, and it's definitely feels, from what I understand from my Jersey City friends that are from Jersey City, born and raised, but it feels like exactly like Brooklyn and Harlem feels, where it's like the soul of the city has been removed, and what exists now is this gentrification and this
It's like,
new culture of the city that isn't reminiscent of what
Yeah,
it used to be.
I mean,
it's like,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I
My
was gonna
bad.
just like, it's like people want this illusion of safety at the cost of like fun and culture. And it's not real safety because it's just arbitrary safety. But it's kind of like the TSA. It's like this illusion of safety to make them all feel better. And then you watch all the... Because like there's like... in order for culture and fun and underground movements and things to survive, there has to be a bit of an attractive, dangerous element to it. Like if there's no danger at all, I don't know. It's just not fun, right? Like it's not
I mean,
exciting. It's not
there's
cool.
danger everywhere, right? Look,
That's
when white people pitch the beauty of America and all these things of America, it's like, yo, America was built on savagery, pure
Facts.
savagery. I was just
Facts.
watching a show of I was just watching a show based on the Mormons um colonizing and
oh
gentrifying the
Utah.
state of Utah. You know what I mean? I forgot the name. It's called American Primeval or something like that. It's a show. It's on Netflix, and it's basically based on like the fight that Mormons would have with the Western men, cowboys, mountain men, indigenous people of the lands, and the wars that they had amongst it. They were, it looks like they were KKK before KKK, because they were running in and invading other Mormons that they didn't want in their land, and they would attack them with these masks on, with these like bags over their heads, and they would do,
That's
pretending that they
crazy.
were like indigenous people just so that they wouldn't get persecuted for murdering and killing their own fellow people. You know what I'm saying? But so I said all that just to say that this country is based on nothing but savagery and animalistic murdering. And so the safety that they think that they are bringing always involves nothing but savagery, right? Because when you move into somebody else's area and you start calling cops on people and bringing cops around because they're too loud or they're doing whatever they're doing, you're hoping that they get popped off and murdered. You know what I'm saying? So you're trying to colonize via savagery and violence. So you're not any better than the people that you are persecuting when you're persecuting those people for just enjoying their culture and being who they are. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, that
loud music doesn't hurt nobody. You know what I'm saying? But calling the cops on people so that hopefully cops show up with their itchy trigger fingers to murder someone, that is violent. And that is, you know what I'm saying? Like
that I saw when I saw that shit and what I was seeing I mean I could see it from all ranges, right? Because I see my people acting the fuck up obviously and shit like that. When I think about going to Puerto Rico, I think we live in a party like carnival like environment from the Caribbean. We have that culturally in our blood. We come from people of we part of also the African diaspora, so that polyrhythmic pattern, complexity shit that goes on. We just people that's part of that, mixed with our indigenous native roots and you know what I'm saying, European and all that shit. So it's a bunch of different genetic memories confused into one group of people that can make somebody so robust and different and shit like that. But there's a history involved in that and a unique cultural personality, right? Something that's really different because it's unique. It's unique. It's almost equivalent to like them Creoles for New Orleans and shit like that. But human beings tend to do that. You know, wherever human beings are, they're always gonna change the dynamics. Like I was looking back like at England and shit, right? And I was thinking like, why is this shit called the United Kingdom? I thought all these motherfuckers spoke one, they all one people. But nah, like it took a long time to evolve from like the Britannia, then the Romans came, then they
yeah,
had
Britannia, and
colonized them, then these
they
motherfuckers, then the Anglo Saxons who were Germanic came over and shit. Then they came. Then after that, the Norse and Vikings came, and then they called it. Then at the very top, you got the Picts who are like Gaelic speaking people with the Irish and shit. And it took a long time before all these different groups with their conflicts became united. And each one of these
and they're
people will
they're
most
still not
likely,
united.
but
You know what I mean?
When the Romans came, they probably gentrified these niggas, right? They fucking created
Yeah.
their own shit on top of their shit. So Europeans been through this shit 20 million times over, and God knows what Middle Easterners have been in 20 times over. Because if you look at what's going on in the Middle East and unraveling, like whatever these
Yeah,
Israeli
no, I
dudes
mean,
did by
it's
trying to bring back like they dead ass brought the clock back 2,000 years back. So now they got the Lebanese Christians, Maronites, who be like, we're not Arabs, we Phoenicians. You got other groups that's like, oh, we're not Arabs, we're Assyrians, or we're not this, or you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? We're Mandians. It's bringing back like unraveling all of this other shit that so it shows you how complex in that world. But
It's
in
not to relate it to American New York shit, right? It's almost like before the Bloods and the Crips got here, when it was the Savage Skulls, the Savage
yeah,
Nomads, and there were all these little gangs, and it wasn't about being a part of a big gang. It was about like codifying and solidifying what it is that you have going on in your section and making sure that that's its own thing separate underneath whatever other
yeah.
banners you want to
but
fly.
like
Now it's on a blanket
but to
umbrella and
to
shit like that.
that
But
to that end, I think what's interesting in what you're saying is, like, I think a lot of the times we forget that over in America, everything that's happened here is really young in a global perspective, right?
Very young.
Because, like, I was just kind of picturing those YouTube videos where you watch, like, the empire maps rise and fall and
yeah,
change over thousands of years. And You can pick pretty much anything in Europe and Asia and even Africa, and it runs back thousands of years of empires rising and falling. And then you get to like our part, and granted, we're not too familiar with the full scope of indigenous history here, but our modern culture is like what, 400 years? You know, like
Yeah, I
it's
think you're right. Like 500 years, and then the United States' existence as a country, as a nation, is only 250, 200
like
something years. So
Canada is
it's
not
Yeah,
even
250.
200.
nah. But you know, the
So
interesting thing about like a lot of these, like you said, we don't know all the in depth of how complex native societies were, which they were, like any other human society, especially if you give the consideration that these peoples have been here populating this place probably continuously since 20,000 years, right? So
like there was like
they,
millions of Mayans and things like that. Like we
I
can't
mean, the
really
Mayans,
fully.
the Anasazi, right over there, like the Pueblos, the Comanches, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, you know what I'm saying? The Incas, the other
Yeah.
Quechua speaking groups. This shit is deep. The Caribs, the Arawakan speaking groups like the Tainos and the Caribs, and you know what I'm saying? It's just the Miamis, the fucking yo. This is even the Cherokees. You know, Cherokees are not the Cherokee. I'm talking about the Seminoles. You know, Seminoles is not a native word. Seminole comes from the word Simurong, right? Simurong means maroon, like escaped slave, this, that, and the third. So when all
Hmm.
of these native peoples that once populated Florida were decimated, the people from the northern regions of that area, like up more, like in Georgia and all that, the Creek Indians, they started to take replace these people. And they came out there. Then black African American slaves escaped from the plantations in Georgia and went with them because this was Spanish territory. So they gave some sort of protection to these people. And that's how that Seminole nation came about. But there is no such word in native culture named Seminole. That's a made up word for Simurong, and that's why you have who they are. They that's a new thing. And it shows you how interesting that natives, even in, they were evolving and creating different nations while there was another nation created by European colonists happening at the same time. That's how interesting this human thing is, right? So imagine how many different nations were created and existed and left, like the Mississippi Mounds, Atzlan, like they say. I mean, even the Aztecs, the reason why they created their stuff is because the surrounding groups around them, they were the underdogs, and they had to take refuge in the swamp on top of that mountain. And from there, because of necessity, they built, like, through aquaponics and all that shit, they created a fucking empire, the Aztec Empire. And then they started to dominate the people and subjugate the people around them and oppress them, which is why when the Spaniards came, they were like, oh, they didn't come with many heads. They knew that there was already people that were upset with the Aztecs, and they just allied themselves with them, and they were able to topple the Aztec Empire. You see what I mean? They already had these mini conflicts occurring way before these European colonists came here. And that was also the downfall. But just like any other group, there was no uniformity. There was no, if you go to Europe, Europe had a conflict in World War II. How many people died? And these are all people that look white that are killing each other for the most part on the European, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia. I mean, even
Yeah.
Hitler looked.
Germany.
Yo, Hitler thought the freaking Slavics were like freaking, like some sort of third party zombie like creatures and shit, and they're
Nah,
no different than these other
there's
Europeans and
definitely
shit. So
like white people are definitely not a monolith. Like we have a whole lot of whiteness that unifies us, but like when you really
I
get
think that the
into it,
monolith
like
is growing more since then, right?
yeah,
Between then to now,
yeah, I mean
it
World War II.
and especially more so here in America, right?
yes,
Because
That's
because
out
out
there, everyone
there,
else
like
is still right. Like
wild,
Italians
like
are in
different
Italy
culture.
being
yeah.
Italians, so they're like, bro, I'm Italian. I'm not white.
Even like
When the
Ukraine to
French
Russia
are
is
in
so
France,
different.
they're French.
Yeah,
They're
not
not white.
every
You know what I
that's
mean? But in America, all these different types of people are just under the one banner of white.
Correct.
You know
And I
what
think,
I mean?
and that
And
was also, I think that was kind of designed. And then they incorporated other peoples
no,
into there.
absolutely by
I mean,
design.
Yeah.
they started bringing in like Arabs and shit. You know, Arabs, Lebanese, and all
Yeah.
those Middle
I
Easterners would be
mean, look,
considered white and shit. So it is what it is.
white passing Latinos consider themselves white
Yeah.
and mark
And
themselves
then
down as white in the census. You know what I mean? And that's where the confusion comes from with the voting block that happened in this last election
Hell yeah.
and
No,
people getting
yo,
but yeah,
what you
there's
saying is
definitely like
what you saying is interesting. I just want to chime in, and I'm sorry for interjecting, but like Puerto Rico's census for quite some time since the United States came and occupied it became statistically more white, right? On paper.
hmm
Not that the people were
hmm
becoming more white, but they're
right.
just writing. Because I mean, I obviously look more Eurocentric, and my genetic makeup is probably 60%, 50 to 60% European from Iberia and all that. 27% native Arawak or Taino, and then the 12% would be black sub-Saharan African, right? I'm lower when it comes to that because the average Puerto Rican is at least they do have that 60%, but they have 25% more African or 20% to 25% more African, and the native ancestry is lower depending on what region you're in, if you're in the mountainous region where the Tainos, like you said, took refuge in that area to escape from like the Spanish persecuting and chasing them, because the Puerto Rico is made up of mountains in the middle where you can
In the
live a
middle,
comfortable
in
life, right?
the the
So
the the top and the bottom are not mountains, but then everything in the middle area
correct.
is wildly mountainous.
So
right.
that's what they
Holden should know a little bit.
No, I do.
He drove through some of those
It's cool
mountains.
because like I can
He
kind of
drove.
picture what you're describing, and
so
honestly, it felt like the like you just driving through these like bridges that all of a sudden become suspended as you're going over some valley that clearly is between these two mountains you're on, and it feels like you're driving through National Geographic,
yeah.
and it's really amazing.
So like a lot of the Caribbean is like that, right? Because these islands came
Right.
because of some sort of volcanic eruption, and some of these things are still attached to the ground that they're from. Like Puerto Rico is an archipelago, right? Because it has other mini islands attached to it and shit like that. And these are just pieces of whatever stuff that was created from, because these did not come from part of the continents that shifted. These were new creations from volcanic eruptions that happen beneath the surface in the
Under
water and
the
shit.
surface, right?
Yeah, so that's why you have the way how they are, and they are extremely like mountainous all in the beginning, and so that's a good place where natives could still continue to kind of defy Spanish domination and then practice, and then Africans would meet with them and they'll intermingle and create maroon communities and shit like that, and that's what people call jivaros, because jivaro is a native word and it means
Ibero.
wild and shit like that. And then there's another group here called the Jato Binuco or some shit like that, and that's for like people of the mountains and shit like that. But when this all started, like when you have the census, right, did not factor in that there's still a large amount of, they said that the Arawaks had died out, but in Puerto Rico, out of all the Caribbean islands, people have more Arawak genetics or Taino genetics than most, right? And people don't know that. And they were saying that was a lie, this, that, and the third, but this was in our folklore. We talked about it all the time. They were saying that there was no real black, that we the whitest island, but everyone was saying, and your grandmother, where she at? Because there's poems about this. So there was this other, in our folklore and our mythos, or not our mythos, but true stuff that was being negated, I guess because they were trying to appease the new colonizers from the United States. Instead of the Spaniards, now went to the Anglos, right? And there was an
So
interesting history already.
can I just ask something to make sure I fully understand what you're saying? Based on how they define the various groups of people, they were statistically making everything whiter. And because of that, the common knowledge and accepted facts started pushing a narrative that went against what the people who've been there for generations know through folklore, legend, etc. And this created like a bit of a brainwashing of sorts through stats, data, and colonizing.
Correct.
So
So
yeah, check it
what
out
you're saying,
real quick.
but I
Let me
just want to
jump in.
say
Go ahead.
just two things, Dutch. Like So the way how the Spanish would go about colonialism and turning natives into to pacify them is through Catholicism, mass conversion, and then making people embrace the Hispanic culture and Hispanidad. Even though people could be mixed, you could end up being just a different type of Spaniard, right? And so this worked. That's why you have now the distinction between Haiti and Dominican Republic. Haiti took over the Dominican Republic and the whole island of 22 years, but they couldn't take out the Hispanidad out of the Dominicans, right? Because the culture is like very, very strong. So the Spaniards would have people, you could technically whiten yourself. So they just breeded people out, right? Until you have like lighter skinned people with kind of nappier hair. That just makes you a Spaniard with curly hair, basically. And that's what they were moving, they were itching toward. Where Anglos had a different way of doing it, things blacks were definitively black, and there was no blurring of the lines. In Spain, under the Spanish racial hierarchy, there was, even to the point where you can actually get a certificate that's to claim that you're white, even though you have a dark or black ancestor, by the local government. Like you'll pay a bit of money and they'll do that. That was crazy, but that's exactly what happened. But still, even then, the population was still kind of a good percentage Afro-Caribbean and mixed, you know, and obviously white, Creole, this, that, and the third. But when the United States came, it's like Puerto Rico started to become whiter on paper, but not on the island. And so the census in 2000 said that Puerto Ricans were 80% white and 20% mixed, and a small percentage was black. But that just didn't tell the correct narrative. And people were like, what the fuck is going on? How the fuck is that? So what happened was these genetic tests started coming out, the ancestry.com shit and all this other shit. And now when they started looking at the results, they're like, oh shit. Like now you can't lie. Now the evidence, the obvious evidence is there. We're in the Caribbean, you know what I'm saying? Surrounded by islands with majority black populations. This is not Argentina. This is not Ireland. It would be hard to continue being the whitest Caribbean island when there's many black people continuously coming to the island, either from the Virgin Islands, either from the English-speaking islands, or either from the neighboring Hispanic islands. As more Haitians go into DR, more Dominicans go into Puerto Ricans. And as more Haitians mix with Dominicans and become Dominicans with Haitian ancestry, more of those Dominicans with Haitian ancestry come into Puerto Rico. And so you can't really stop that from going on. And I don't know exactly what they were trying to achieve by doing so, but eventually the cat was out the bag.
And it
and
just
then
sounds like they're like gerrymandering genetics.
I mean, check it out. So I
but
recently,
one more thing, I just want to say one more thing, Dutch. So now in 2020 the census was taken, and now bug the fuck out that Puerto Rico is like, now it says that they're 80% mixed, right? And only 17% white, which about 3 years ago, it went from 80% white and 20% mixed. How the fuck? You don't see how crazy that is, bro?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
fucking a phenomenon. What the fuck? That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, no, but what it speaks to is what it is that they were trying to do, right? And so I could tell you because, right, I looked up on like through Know Your Roots, through finding, because I didn't ever do a 23andMe, right? Like I never gave my blood for my DNA to be told, right? But what I did do was look up on .org of like my family. I think it's like familytree.org or something like that. And so like I found my great grandfather's name in a census in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, and how he was born in the late 1800s and his wife was born in the early 1900s. Right, because actually the census was from like the 19 teens. So like the
Right.
1917s or something like that, 1920s or something like that. And he was listed as a mulatto. And so was my great great grandmother, also listed as a mulatto. And so I just started like investigating, like, why is it that people would call themselves mulatto in the census back then, right? And it was because of many reasons, right? Which was either you were actually mulatto, right? Which is you were actually a mix of African and indigenous, with a splash of some sort of raping from a white, a colonizing Spanish conquistador man in your blood or something like that. Or that was one of the more prevalent reasons why people would call themselves mulatto, right? Which is they are mulattoes. Another reason that they would call themselves mulatto is if they were too black, they would call themselves mulatto to seem as if though they were partially whitened with some Spanish conquistador blood, so that they could get more opportunities. Because if they were just plain black, in African along with indigenous, that didn't beget you many opportunities on the island or anywhere that the Americas existed, right? And this is already after after America took over the island of Puerto Rico, right? So, and also, let me finish. Then the other main reasons being, that they were doing these things for the census sake, right? Um, Participating in something that you didn't want to be participating in, which is another big thing, which is why I was gonna say that we likely had these skewed numbers many years ago, because you're not getting an actual. I don't know, if you know any black people or any brown and black people in New York City or the tri-state area, you know that we notoriously do not participate in censuses. We are not the census taking type of people. So when you get a census, you're already dealing with skewed numbers, because you're not going to get everybody to participate in our communities, because we historically do
So
not participate in these things. And so, to get to it, what I was trying to say is that these censuses were going to always be skewed, because it wasn't ever made for us or made to help us. We always felt like it was made to keep us in line and keep us oppressed. So even when you're getting a census, you're getting a skewed census. You're getting black and indigenous populations saying that they don't want to be marginalized and not given any good opportunities, so they might list themselves as mulattoes. You got actual mulattoes listing themselves as mulattoes. Some mulattoes that were passing for white were calling themselves white, because they just wanted the better opportunities and the ability to have better opportunities, so that their families weren't kept within boxes that they didn't want to be kept inside of. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So all that shit is like, it don't even really represent correctly. And then now we get the numbers that we get, because we actually finally are at a point where we tend to want to participate in some of these things more, right? Even when you're a great conspiracy theorist, you might participate in a 23andMe. My older brother is in the Navy, and he's a conspiracy theorist himself, and he participated in a DNA test, you know what I mean, online, which is like very not him, not the type of shit that he would usually do. But
yeah,
we are participating in these things more, because we want to know where we come from. We want to know, we know that the technology is there, and we're still hopeful of not being taken advantage of. Unfortunately, because we see that these companies that did do these DNA testings
like
have gone
Black
bankrupt
Rock and
and
shit.
are being like sold. It's more than likely that like our information is being sold out there, same
I
as like
mean,
our fucking
we
email,
on
with
Facebook, we on
Gmail,
everything.
Facebook, everything. But we already participate in a bunch of shit exactly that you just named, that is already selling all
So
our information online. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't really I mean, I don't know if it doesn't really matter. We won't know for another 100 fucking years
Yeah,
how
honestly, I
how
don't.
foul they can get with our DNA, right? But the point that
I
I'm
mean,
trying to get to is that we participated more than we ever have previous generations in these censuses and in these tests that tell you who
Yeah,
we actually are as a people. And so
that's
that's why the numbers now are more realistic than they ever were before. Also,
well,
another thing to mention, right, that you were talking about, which is like the fact that people, the independentistas, right, your friends at VIPR, right,
yeah,
uh that is another thing that I was just talking to Holden about a few weeks back during I think it was like February. I was having more and more conversations based around the conversation of the involvement of Puerto Ricans in hip hop and whatnot. And something that I had looked up was the fact that historically, when Puerto Ricans on the island of Puerto Rico voted for their voting blocks, the vote was usually always split between staying a commonwealth and becoming a state, becoming the 51st state. And it isn't until recent time that like when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, a majority of the votes were always like 60%
yeah,
remain exactly how we are, 30%,
correct.
28%
PNP, PPD, that's what they call it.
to become a state, and then it was like 5% to become independent. But now more than ever, you see of like a 40% or 30 heavy block people wanting to be independent of America, and then the other people that are still strong are the people who want things to just remain
Remain the
status
same.
quo
right.
and
Yeah,
remain the same.
But
Many people don't want to be a state anymore. I find that interesting. These numbers all
so yeah.
speak to the conversation that we're having right
No,
now,
I mean,
which
but
is
even just
everything that you were. Hold on. I'm about to wrap it
yeah,
up. Everything that you were mentioning, CF, about like
yeah,
what you've learned from Chino when it came to, you know what I'm saying, God body shit, which is like lessons of self and building of knowledge of self. You know what I'm saying?
right.
And
that's
without that
100%.
knowledge of self, you know what I'm saying? We are a lost people, and we've been a lost people for a long time. And I think that more than ever now we're finding ourselves. And I think that that's what your album kind of is, right? Like what you talked about with the book, him giving you the book,
100%.
him telling you it's not the book of Chino, it's the book of you. And in finding yourself, you find Chino. And so, in you finding yourself and in you defining yourself and who you are and who you've come through as a Puerto Rican in Jersey, New Jerican, right? New Jerusaleman,
New Jamaican.
New Jerusaleman, right?
Yeah,
Um, these in all this is what we get from,
Right.
you know what I mean,
Yep.
the book of Chino, which is gonna be dropping when?
I mean, I think I want to drop that about next week. I'm waiting for one joint, so I'm
Right.
thinking about. Let me see what calendar date that I got here, cause I
So
don't.
you would drop it on your Bandcamp first, and then you
I
drop it on DSPs, or do you not drop on DSPs and just focus on Bandcamp?
No,
Or
I definitely drop on Bandcamp first. But you know what I found out through Bandcamp as an independent artist? Like they actually people purchase records there more, and
Mhm.
then I'm able to obviously pay the engineers and things of that nature. And
Absolutely.
then I go through like the other digital distribution platforms and then let it just ride on that or whatever. But I mean, normally I don't get paid for this shit. Really, like we really are public service when it comes to music. We don't get paid for this
Right.
shit. We just love this
Yeah, no,
shit.
I
You
tell
know what I
people
mean?
all the time that I make okay money from the music, but it doesn't pay my champagne bill for the year. You know what I
No, hell
mean?
no.
But I do drink a lot of champagne, so that also might be
Yeah.
unfair. Another person might be like, it covers my phone bill for the year. God damn it!
I mean,
You know what
what
I'm
we
saying?
doing
But
with this hip hop shit is like what the pioneers did when they was first doing hip hop. Is basically out of love is for the obsession, because that's what talent starts as, an obsession to be good because you love something, and then you loving it so well and being good at it. The byproduct of that would be you generating revenue from it. But unfortunately, in this
Right.
type of world that we live in currently, it's not, that doesn't translate that well. You know, a carpenter gets paid for being a great carpenter. A fucking painter gets paid for being a great painter. Uh, computer technician gets paid for whatever they do. But as an artist, that's subject to interpretation and shit like that. And a lot of times, you could be the dopest person, dopest artist, but it doesn't translate to actually
I
bringing
You
in
mean,
know,
some of the
if
greatest
it counts for
artists in
anything,
history, you know,
yeah,
I would
Van
say
Gogh
like
didn't get
that
his
got
props while he
nothing,
was alive.
nothing to
You know what I
most of
mean?
them.
yeah.
Um,
And I think that's, and
Michelangelo wasn't very
Mike,
rich while he
you
was
already know
alive.
exactly. So a lot of these people like, and there was a sponsorship. Now we got like, Patreon and all these other things where people could
But
sponsor you and shit like that.
even to that end, even what you're saying translates to most occupations. Like if you really go into white collar land, almost like half of the success, if not more, is related to being born with the right father, and nepotism reigns free. And so it's like life really isn't a meritocracy in any domain, whether it's in the art world. I mean, yes, if you're absolutely great at your stuff, at some point, if you're lucky, and there's usually that if you're lucky element, you will get recognized in your lifetime, and that would be big blessings. But a lot of the legends of history are people we recognize after they died, if we're
Yeah.
being completely
I,
honest.
shit.
And like, I don't
Yeah.
mean that to be bleak. It's that if you're not
no, it's the
doing
truth.
this for the
It's,
timelessness of the love of knowing that it maybe doesn't happen for you like that, and then, like when I say like that, I mean everybody's dream is to get paid and just do this, but like
yeah.
if it never happens like that, that isn't necessarily the point. Sometimes your impact can be felt. Sometimes you just never know you have an impact. You do this your whole
That's
life,
deep.
and then like somebody will hit you on Facebook and be like, yo, the last 9 years, you don't know this, but I started doing XYZ because of your XYZ. And you might
Right.
never know. And that's a real thing,
Yeah.
especially if you're in the underground of this and you're really not seeing your flowers. That doesn't mean what you're doing doesn't have an impact. But as an artist, if you're not doing it for the passion and the love of the art form and just the growth of it all as a person, I find there's a bit of a personal development too. Then you're not really
Yeah, I mean,
gonna
look at Chino.
sustain.
I think that, before he passed, there was a lot of like just kind of overlooking his contributions and greatness, right? But since then, when recently everybody was doing these like Mount Rushmores of things, you know what I mean? I saw when people talked about the Mount Rushmore of Puerto Rican rappers, Chino XL was one of the like most like mentioned names of the names not being included. You know what I mean? So when like people saw that you'd have a list and you didn't have Chino on your list, people would be like, "Nah, where Chino at though?" You know what I'm saying? And like that's its
and,
own,
and
legacy
even
within itself. You know what
in a
I'm
more
saying? Like,
micro way, I have a friend who honestly, one of his biggest dreams was to see me interview Chino XL because he was a huge fan. And one of
yeah,
his biggest memories, or something that actually got him through like darker places in his life, is one time Chino XL answered his voice note and sent him back a voice note and gave him a props. And that's probably a little moment for Chino. He might not even remember this if he was, but for this guy, it was just the humility in having his hero respond to him in that capacity was so impactful that it really gave him a sense of faith in humanity that got him through darker times. And so it's
and
I
because
don't
of
know,
that
it's
person, I had reached out to Penn and asked him if he could link us up with Chino to do an interview. And Penn was like, "Yeah," he had hollered at Chino, and we had gotten an agreement to do the interview, but we just didn't find
life.
it. We wanted to do it in person with Chino. You know what I'm saying? And we just didn't.
Yeah,
get, the opportunity to, but like that doesn't erase, you know what I mean,
that's
any of
deep. That's
like
deep.
his greatness, you know what I'm saying?
Nah,
Like
I think like
uh
like the the to touch on the fact what Holden said in terms of like when it comes to doing art and your commitment to your art and your passion, right? Like sometimes we do this thinking that the stuff that we make will be encapsulated in, or put inside of some sort of time capsule and be found by like extraterrestrial life forms generations from now as a reflective of what occurred during this period within human history, right? That's sometimes we
mhm.
think that, or we think about the future generations that we're going to impact that we don't know we've impacted yet. Like you said, there could be people. There's many people that come up to me and be like, oh, "I'm really inspired by your movement, and you don't even know how much of a legend you are to many people because you're too busy creating." You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because we're in that hamster wheel of trying to just create and come up and have accumulate a cache of songs before our time is up. Because I'm assuming that even though Cheeto, you know, uh, the way he left this world, he knew what was going on, but he didn't know that it would end up being like this 5 years ago before his
Right.
Right,
death. You get what I mean?
right.
So like
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. Like there's a big legacy. I was thinking about I've been recently, I don't know why, but I've been watching a lot of documentaries about Neanderthals and early human other human or other hominids outside the Homo sapiens that existed before us for millions of years, right? When you think about human history or Homo sapiens, we only been around here for 200,000 years, right? The planet's been around for 4 billion years. The explosion of life that came in from the Cambrian explosion, that's 500 million years. Dinosaurs been around for 80 million years. Homo erectus was around for 2 million years or some shit like that. And within this 200,000 years of us, our species being here, the ability to record information and vocals just happened this century or the century of the 1900s or whatever. So
Or
a lot of
from
people.
what we know, right?
Yeah,
Because we
I
don't know,
guess
like
there
back
could
in
be lost
back
civilizations that all I'm doing is from what I know,
yeah,
right?
That's
And
a
yeah,
my
from what we
fact.
knowledge
know.
obviously is
Right.
limited.
Yep.
But now it's important that we document, even though everything's being documented every single fucking day, because now we're saturating the shit out the gamers. 8 billion motherfuckers out there, and at least half of them got networking devices and shit like that. Whatever the fuck case is, even through all this drowning out and saturated with all these voices, one day all this may disappear, and God knows what is the remnant of it, what will remain and what not.
I tell
I,
people all the time to back up their backup with everything. Like
Yo, it's
YouTube can go away tomorrow, and what happens to your music videos? What happens to your, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
everything that you have uploaded
Yo,
to YouTube. Like YouTube isn't our platform.
let me tell you
None of
something.
these platforms are our platforms.
I
You know what
was
I'm
watching
saying?
I was watching a documentary on jazz, and there was this guy who was like a known ragtime singer. He was fucking amazing. At least that's what they say, right? There's no recording of him, and he
that's yo.
was performing at the advent of the vinyl record. They started creating vinyl records. They had it that you could have your shit on record for people to be heard. And he was like, "Nah, I ain't doing that. Somebody might try to steal my style." The motherfucker was scared of the technology, and
Right.
now no
That
one knows
happens.
him. No one knows him. But that's what
There's
I'm saying.
literally
Like it's
still
so.
producers. I know producers right now who literally don't upload their beats to SoundCloud or YouTube or anything because they don't want their beats getting jacked by a rapper, right? Which
Ah,
is like the Trinidad James All Gold everything. He jacked that beat from just a random producer, and then the producer comes knocking after All Gold everything goes wild, and he hits his city, and he's going to a radio station in his city, and he pops up on him like, "Yo, bro, that was my fucking beat."
yo, that's
And
gangster.
Trinidad James is like, he here, I'll break you off, and he broke him off some paper. And but it's like at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like it's a catch 22. Like, what do you do? Do you
Yeah,
not put your stuff up? Do you put your stuff up? Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
it's
there's a lot
always
of
the biggest thing. But yo, I just had this thought, right? Because you were saying about the importance of recording everything, right? Especially like, look, if we really want to have real representation and understandings of culture and I guess at a more deeper and complex level, so we could say that the DNA technology, because it's, you know, it's a technology, the way it got access to everyone,
Yeah.
shifted literally census data from like 80-20 in the other direction, right?
That's crazy, right?
There's a power to more accurate information. So if we go in a maybe more dystopian direction, all of us uploading our lives via technology kind of gives the AI a real representation of what the averages are out there in a way that none of us would ever see, because it sees all of this giant. I mean, now everybody's contributing, like you said. So it could be a good or a bad thing, but it does sound like
Might be a good
the
thing. Like if AI were to watch
average.
this interview, they're gonna be like, "These are three good people. We should
Right.
not. We should not
Yo, that's
terminate her.
gangster
We
that
should not
AI could do
terminate
that.
her judgment day.
No,
This
but
we
I'm gonna
should
tell
not
you,
terminate her judgment
Right?
day. These people. These are three
yo,
good guys right here. Like, what are
yo,
we
but
doing?"
Dutch, hold and look, this is what I think is right. Like, there's gonna be a day when there's gonna be no human content, where there's only gonna be
Right.
impersonations of human content through
Shit,
the use
I'm
of
looking
AI.
into that right now. How to create
So
avatars right now.
exactly. So this expression, human expression, and this is a small moment. Like again, there were Neanderthals, Homo erectus, there
Right.
were
Super
all
small
these other
moment.
people, and they never documented a lot. A lot. There's cave paintings and shit. Obviously, the reason why we know that there was fucking cave lions in Europe is because someone documented it in a cave, right? Which is fucking impactful because then it tells us and gives us insight to what these people viewed, that they had the capability of illustrating what they saw in real time, putting it somewhere so that we can dig through this and then find it. They wasn't doing it for us. They was doing it because they needed to express the stimulus that they saw, but the
Honestly,
byproduct of
we
that
don't
is that we
even know
know.
what. For all we
That's
know, they
true. They
were
never
kind of
know. They
doing it for
probably
us.
for the
Like, we
or
don't know
even
that it wasn't some like random underground artist of like minus 4000 BC, and he's up in the cave, and everybody's hating on his art, and everybody
Right.
back in the days doing this. And maybe what happened was is that wall art is like boom bap or something, and there was some other kind of art like on
yo, that's
tablets or some
gangster,
shit,
Nah,
and
bro.
then
definitely check
That's
this out because
gangster.
as we've been talking, I'm thinking about that, right? About the
That's
fact
some
that, like, look,
gangster shit,
we
yo.
we upload our music to streaming, right? And but what was it that and we have like what we have now are essentially jump drives and online streaming. Before that, it was CDs and MP3s. Before that, it was tape decks. Before that, it was 8-track. Before that, it was records, right?
Finals.
We don't know vinyl. We don't know, like, literally in the BC era, there could have been something that recorded something,
like
right? Because we've lost. There are years that are the lost years of human civilization, right? I forgot what it's called, that era that
There could have
is
been
like
other ice
like
ages
a
that
there,
occurred and
and
shit,
like
and that
there could
caused
have
us
been
so.
recordings on ice. You know what I mean? There could have been recordings
we don't actually
on
know what was in all the libraries that Alexander torched.
we
Yeah.
don't know. You know what I'm saying? We don't know.
Or when they
And
touch.
we don't know what to look for, right? Because 2000 years from now, if there's another lost era, they won't know to look at. They'll see a jump drive, they'll see a tape, they'll see a CD, and they'll just be like, what the fuck is this? They're gonna look at it like, what is this? Why is this so shiny on one side? What is this writing that's on the other side of the CD? Like, what is this, right? Like, the same way that we probably look at things that we discover from caves as like, what is this? What? Like, what
Yeah.
were
Or
they
like
doing with
just
this back in the day?
like on
We
some
think that the
other side,
pots that we
right?
find are just pots and vases, and the pots and the vase could be what they use to record
Because like
musical. You know what I mean? Because we
if
don't know how it was that they managed to play things or do things. You know what I'm saying?
like if
Like, we
ancient
just
Egypt
literally
might
don't
have
know.
had electricity and all this other shit where we really don't
I
know.
mean, they
If
say
they
that they
had
had batteries, right? They had
So
batteries.
if
So,
they
like, if they
had
had
like
batteries,
tech like that, for all we know, they like some random gemstones that be all up in there could be like the most banging albums of Egyptian, like but like we don't know. I mean, I know it's a
Nah.
little far fetched
we
and
don't
out
know.
there,
Now it
but
is a little far
it
fetched and out there, but I mean it's not, right? It's just that we think it's far fetched and out there because we have yet to discover what we don't know.
I mean,
You know what I'm saying?
I remember when I used to go to open mics and like when I started going to EO Dub and um Pyramid specifically, right? When after the Baby Jupiter, Love Sexy, when they evolved and then had a stable home at the Pyramids on 7th Street at Avenue A. I remember one time Zoo getting on stage and like this. I want to hear the dopest MC that's living in a project somewhere in New York City that no one ever heard of. That he probably got the dopest shit and he's just too scared to come out to show the world how much talent. That's what we doing this for. That's what that open mic platform was about. And that was deep when I heard that and shit like that because of the fact that a lot of people out there are geniuses and they're scared to express themselves, especially given in this time because everything is like oversaturated where everyone is creating, but not everyone is good at
I mean,
creating. You know what I'm saying? So
before it even got oversaturated, right? Because what you're talking about is almost like a 15 to 20 year ago period when Zoo might have said that, right? And before that, right? Like you hear Cameron talk. Cameron has spoken about with Mace on his show about this dude from Harlem that's like the nicest. He considers him to this day one of the best rappers he's ever heard, and it's just a dude that nobody ever really heard of. That Poison Pen actually has mentioned this same dude, I believe. I don't know if it's Panama Joe or somebody that like is like was somebody that was like from the era from New York City in that era, like with Big L and them,
yeah,
but
that
like he just didn't really he never got a record deal. He never got on like that, so people don't know who he is. But the dudes that were running around New York City and rapping and going into other people's neighborhoods,
they was
they
like,
know
yeah,
him and they
no
know that
doubt,
he's one of the illest motherfuckers that ever
yeah.
fucking spit. You know what I'm saying? And like we got to try to remember those names and exalt those names
but
and
then there's a
pass that
whole like
legacy on. And then we
there's
also
just
got to make sure to pass on these names. You know what I mean? Like
That's that.
Legend is a representative of Jersey City, and like Puerto Ricans, and like the intersectionality of representation that he represents is too valuable to discard like any old piece of you know content being uploaded. This isn't just some other rando putting out content. This is one of the greatest minds of our era. You know what I'm saying? And we need to exalt people like Legend, which is why we like to why we had you on our platform before,
yo, I
and
literally
why you are a part of Boricua Bash, which will be on Friday, June 6th
Yeah,
at
hell
Sugar
yeah.
Mouse, New York, 8 p.m. to midnight,
plug.
where CF will be
Lower East
headlining
Side, hell yeah.
Let's go.
at the Lower East Side, and he will be performing. You know what I'm saying? But like that's why we exalt our own, and that's why we need to keep on exalting each other. We need to do exactly what Legend is doing with this album. Right? He's passing on the lesson that he was given from Chino. Chino gave him a
Right.
empty book so that he could create, and now he's going to give this album to the world so that hopefully another generation of young
Yeah,
people can know to do the same. and and we give him platform, he gives platform to others. You know what I'm saying?
facts.
And that's the way it goes. Each one look out for each other and like back each other up and build your community amongst your community, and stop chasing don't go chasing waterfalls, as the famous group TLC said. You know what I'm
Facts.
saying?
I
Don't
mean,
go chasing waterfalls. Chase those that are right next to you, and who are doing greatness, and exalt them,
Right.
because exalting those that are next to you and doing greatness is cleansing for the soul, yo.
a hundred
You know what I'm
percent.
saying?
So I just wanted to like add to the overall idea of art and creation and passion and everything. There's a lot of people I meet, especially since I drive Uber now, where they create art, they do it, They're actually possibly more talented than people you've ever seen perform, but they do not create art with any desire for commercial success, fame, or notoriety. In fact, they do not ever care if anybody ever hears their art while they're alive. And there's so many stories in history of when some random person, some quiet neighbor dies and they go search, they find like hordes of the craziest paintings you've ever seen and things like that, and inventions and ideas and poetry. And so it's like we don't even know yet the large hordes of hard drives full of some of the best music we've never heard, just because those people didn't put it out. And who knows, maybe those people who spent just all their time on their craft and no time ever on marketing and promotion are actually creating the timeless music. Like, you know, this is my brain just kind of running with it.
No, but that's amazing. That
That'd
you
be
say
fire.
that. There's artists out there like what was that? Arthur Russell, right? He's pretty dope. Basically out of that New York abstract scene or whatnot, and then didn't get like and he was just creating just to create content on some demo shit. Not that it would end up having any commercial success. I think he may have died of HIV or something of that nature, but his memory, his music continues to live on. Do you have people like Segundo what was his name? Was it Son Rodriguez? It was the Sugar Man, like their song Sugar Man.
Sugar Man,
Uh
yeah, he has a whole
was this
documentary.
yeah, so and his music, I don't know if the name is correct, like the way I said it, but no
Sugar Man.
one no, the first one, the Segundo, I don't know if that was the name, but what I'll say, he was a Mexican dude, Mexican American dude who was signed to Motown, I believe, out of Detroit. Had a lot of music that's like very reminiscent of a basic Bob Dylan type.
Sugarman
Um,
Rodriguez, Sixto Rodriguez.
Sixto Rodriguez
Sixto
never
Rodriguez.
didn't get his fame till he left the
After.
music behind, didn't think anything would be of it, and then became a construction worker, and then find out that he had like this amassed
Super following in
fame
New Zealand
in New
and
Zealand and
Australia.
Australia and South Africa, and then he goes there and the stadium's packed with like fucking hundreds of thousands of people or 60. So you know what I'm saying? Like, and no one, he did not know that. He did not know that his shit was getting spins and rotations in other places. But there's a beauty in that, right? Because
Right,
he didn't get caught up into the fame that would have came with that, right?
right,
Until way
right.
later when he had the knowledge and the understanding and the wisdom to appreciate those experiences that if he was young he would not have. And a lot of times when you get people that end up being catapulted into stardom, like it's like a person that wins the lottery overnight, but they're not educated on being wealthy. They're not wealthy minded. They're just rich. And a rich person just, if they, especially if they lived like in the hood or impoverished conditions prior, they're gonna spend everything because that's what capitalism, you know, because ultra consumer capitalism compels you to spend shit just for the sake of spending shit, like breathing air, right? So they're spending shit, then they turn around, they don't have anything because they weren't educated and to save money, to do things right. That comes in with later time experience, family members who were wealthy. You get what I mean? So it's interesting what could have been if he would have got fame earlier and things of that nature, but something beautiful about his experience because that's a human situation. A lot of times, you know, the greats don't get known on them now, they get known way later because they may have been either ahead of their time or they may have done things that just was going against the the what the industry is currently pumping out. I mean, right now we know that like even with the situation with FBA and the backlash with a lot of like Puerto Rican, they were like, well, there ain't that many Puerto Rican rappers. If y'all helped start hip hop, where the fuck y'all at? Well, if the gatekeepers kept us out, then imagine how many other artists out there. Human music and human expression a lot of times comes through adversity, right? If you make it difficult for us, we're going to continue to create. You might gatekeep and not allow us to have the resources and the platforms to this, but it doesn't mean that one day it won't be let out to the people because the gatekeepers may not be around 30 years from now. You know what I mean? And there's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
people when gates open, like who the fuck? What are when the AI starts creating shit, they're gonna go back and look for content on SoundCloud shit and be like, this. I just want to hear regular human beings expressing themselves.
Right.
Yo, and to that
Fact.
end, if you look at how, so I've had the most interesting experience with Gen Z. My understanding with their musical taste is they do in fact do the research that people don't think they do. They just don't like the same things we used to like. So they hear some stuff we consider legendary and classic, and they're like, that ain't it. And then they'll find the most random track that everybody hated on some album, and that's their favorite song or something. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
it's also
I
it's
like
mean, look,
it's a
there's like a
contrarian trolling, like Last Jedi type vibe type shit that goes on right
I
now with this
actually I
generation.
don't think I don't even think it's on purpose like that.
I call it revisionist history, right? Because there's a lot of revising of the history that we come from, right? I remember living through the era, the what's considered now as the golden era, which is really technically speaking the silver age, right? Which was the golden era would be the 80s with Rakim, Coogee Rap, Kane, and them. But a lot of people call the 90s the golden era. You know what I mean? When really the golden would be the 80s and then the silver would be the 90s. Regardless of what you would call the 90s era, right? I lived through that era. And I remember Big L coming out and New York City overwhelmingly and like not even just New York City, like the entire culture as a whole overwhelmingly was like, mm, nah, this is not it. This is not a classic album. And back then, you had to put out a classic album on your first release in order to be considered the best rapper, right? Like that was that these
That's
were the
90s shit, yeah.
requirements for 90s shit, right? And we didn't like the culture heard lifestyles of the poor and dangerous. It was like, this is cool, but this is not Illmatic. This is cool, but this is not Ready to Die. You know what I mean? This is cool, but this is not Enter the Stage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There was a lot of comparison to other artists, and it just was like an overwhelming. It didn't cut the mustard. But now you
Right.
leave it to young people, and they're like, "Yo, Lifestyle of the Poor and Dangerous is the greatest album of all time. Big L is the greatest rapper of all time." I don't think that DJ Premier or Dr. Dre is the greatest producer of all time. I think Jay Dilla is the greatest producer of all time. You know what I mean? There's a lot of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, Jay Dilla got a
uh,
cult
I
following
call it,
up in
I
Montreal.
call it, I call it revisionist history. But like, yeah, I mean, you could also look at it as trolling. You could also look at it like Holden's looking at it and saying
I
like,
don't look
nah,
at it
this
as
is
that. It's just
just them
like what they
literally
like.
taking
Like, yo, my
what they
dad
like.
and I
Yeah.
hear the same Led Zeppelin album, and he thinks it's the greatest shit he ever heard, and I'm like, this sounds like not the greatest shit I ever heard. Not that it's bad music, but there's just like, I don't ever have an inkling to throw Led Zeppelin on. Like, it never happens in my life. When I hear it, I can appreciate it for how good it is. It's just, I don't have the memories with it. I don't have all the moments with it. So now I'm left to objectively analyze the music. And I think, to Flacco's point, when you grow up with this history connecting to it, like here's an example. I saw somebody wearing a Green Day album, one of those Green Day album, The American Idiot. Now that shit, when I'm 17, yo, that's my shit, right? And then this is just some kid who's like, yeah, that one song's cool. I just like the design, and like their whole experience with the idea of if even listening to an album is completely different because they're young and they don't know what album
They
listening
don't
is.
listen to albums. They
So
just
it's
listen
like,
to a couple
so
songs.
you listen to it and it's like, how can we think they're even trolling? They have never come from a culture of listening to the full composition of an album and evaluating music from that lens. They know playlists,
Right.
they know singles, they know music videos. And then I'm like, but like American Idiot's a rock opera. Like you have to listen to the whole. I'm like, nah, I'm like, I know how old they sound and all this shit when I'm saying it because they're young and they're giving me that look. But I'm like, damn, it's not like a hatred. It's a real cultural ignorance because they never went to no HMV
No,
and
it's just
dropped
a
no
different
$20
cultural
on a fucking
experience.
record. And then when you
Exactly.
buy that record,
Exactly.
you gonna listen to that motherfucker because you put your $20 down, and you gonna listen to it
Right.
even the mid songs because you paid for that shit.
Yo,
Right.
I mean,
But
like
they don't feel that way.
I think about
Not at all.
when I think about doing like when I started doing albums and shit, like every single album, I did, I started thinking about I would listen to the interesting thing when we talk about 99.5 WBAI, 99.5 was public radio, right? So on sometimes they'll
Mhm.
show different types of genres of music, right? That's what they'll play because that's what it is. But it was
They
abstract,
play jazz a
underground
lot.
shit you won't get on there. So I would listen to this lady named Nancy Rodriguez and she'll play like Afro-Cuban music. But really Afro-Cuban just drums like folkloric music straight from like Matanza from Havana. And then she'll play Afro-Puerto Rican music. And I like the sacredness in it. I like the fact that it was just, it comes a song, you go into it, there's a seriousness in it, there's no interlude, then it goes out, and then it starts another one. But it's something like culturally pure about it, it's folkloric. And that's the type of way how I design my albums. Like I design it with that kind of essence of like, this is sacredness, this is pure, and some of these songs may cut abruptly because that's what they're meant to do. This is like me as a folklorist just preserving the culture through music as opposed to looking for like commercial success. But then I also look on the other side of what albums were life transformative for me. And a lot of those don't necessarily have to be obviously hip hop. Because to me, like OK Computer from Radiohead is a mind blowing project for me. Like that shit is life transformative. That's transformed my life. Things from Pink Floyd, obviously, atmospheric shit I fuck with a lot. Things from like the Beatles. Paul McCartney is still one of my John Lennon and things of that nature. Like so, I'm looking at all different sources to find stuff to create. So even recently, I heard Genesis did an album that's a concept album which was based about a Puerto Rican youth in New York City. And I'm like, I gotta check that shit out. I gotta, that's
Wait,
gangster that they
Genesis,
did.
Phil Collins, Genesis?
Yeah, that ass, yo. That
Word.
shit's so
Wait,
gangster. And
from
I'm like,
back in the
yo,
days, or they recently did that?
this is back in the days. Phil Collins, I don't even think is
Damn,
sick.
that's
He's like
crazy.
very sick now and shit like that. But like at that
Word.
time, and I'm like, oh shit, they were doing that. Or like Paul Simon's Cape Man and shit like that. Or even Paul Simon or Simon and Garfunkel. And you know what I'm saying? I can appreciate all types of music from whatever genre. Uh, 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 from all over. So like when I'm doing an album and shit like that, there has to be a level of sacredness to it. There has to be obviously an introduction and an outro. And then I'm hoping one day that someone will look back and be like, what the fuck was this person thinking when that came out? I remember one time I listened to Funkmaster Flex, right? He was playing um Smooth the Hustler. It was broken English, right? And he's like, man, what the fuck was they thinking when they came out with that? And I know because I was there when that record came out, but now like many years later during the pandemic, he just happened to play that record and he himself knows, but he revisited that idea and be like, man, what the fuck? Like what went on that time? And that's what you want to do when you do music. Like you want to get somebody and be like, yo, what the fuck? You gave me a perspective. You put a wrinkle in my brain that I did not think about. You changed my perspective. You leveled me up a notch that I did not think from that point of view. Like you made me think in a different frame of mind. And giving someone a different perspective makes them become innovative in other things, not just the music. That music allows them to go to work and do things outside of the box that they would normally do to probably increase productivity for whatever company they're in. We are driving minds to be wired differently so that they can produce things in different ways or in their own interpretation of whatever that difference is. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I
Absolutely.
think music is about. Like music is about doing things that are encapsulating a perspective in time. So when I do an album, I'm thinking about all that stuff. And just to add something else, recently I found out there was the passing of what I thought was a pretty dope artist, and he never got his just due, known as Gemini the Gifted One, based in Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? He did an album with, I think it was with Danger Mouth or some shit like that.
Ginger
And
Mouse. Yeah.
yeah, Danger Mouse. Yeah, see, I don't, yo, I be so out of tune. Past 90s shit, yo. When it gets to the 2000s and all that shit, I stop not listening
Yeah,
to albums and
Gemini.
shit.
Gemini was, he had like a little situation. He was like, if you were paying attention in those early 2000s, he was like,
He got locked up or some
if
shit like that.
yeah, something like that.
But I
I'm
mean,
not
like,
100% sure, but
all I
yeah.
know is that I remember there were these. See, hip hop on in would be kept alive through the Barbados and Stretch, through the Special K and Teddy Ted, through the WBAI, through the Martin Moores and shit like that, before the advent of Napster, before internet, before, you know what I mean, Sirius radio and all this bullshit. And it was something that was very personal and intimate, you know what I'm saying? And that's an experience that can never be replicated, especially now going where we're going now with AI technology and things of that nature. So we live in a very special period, and we're
Well,
not
that's
gatekeepers, but we're
also,
definitely
I
like,
think, I
my
just want
bad.
to push back a little bit on that because I think you even touched on it earlier. All the AI push is going to do is going to make people go back towards authenticity. Like, here's a weird trend happening if you're a professional writer, or at least a blogger, like in that world of like Substacks and shit. You kind of leave a 1-2 grammar mistake in now that you might have taken out because it makes it look more like a human wrote this and nobody questions your AI of a 1-2 cent. Not enough to break anything. Just a little mistake that you might have fixed, you might leave in now because it looks human. And I'm like trying to explain this to all the grammar Nazis out there. Like, y'all don't sell writing.
Well,
Y'all are
you
consumers of
know,
writing, and that's beautiful. But I have people who question sometimes if what I write is AI. So I have to actually take this into consideration when I put that out there, that I'm now fighting this perception. And already I write in a
of
goofy
AI.
style that's kind of AI-like. So I'm like, damn, son, that is unfortunate for me. But you leave a couple mistakes in and people take, oh, no, he wrote this. And they don't even think twice. And it's like,
I
all
mean,
right.
some of the greatest artists, RZA, what I took from RZA that, like, I mean, RZA is one of the greatest producers of all time. Definitely one of my, like, favorite producers of all time, personally speaking. But, like, something that I've borrowed heavily from that's why whenever I run into any of like, what I said to Melly Mel is the same thing that I said to Kaz, which will be the same thing that I'll say to RZA the day that I meet him, which is the same thing that I say to any rapper that came before me, which is like, thank you, and thank you for your contributions. You know what I mean? Thank you for everything that you've given me. You know what I'm saying? And like, I take little things from everybody, right? And one of the things that RZA would do is like, RZA would leave mistakes in the music, like things that like other people would be like, take it out or like do another take, and it's just like RZA would leave things in that were like quote unquote mistakes, but he'd be like, nah, bro, that's what makes this art, that's what makes this great, that's what makes this it. You know what I mean? And Old Dirty Bastard would make a lot of those, but like Old Dirty Bastard's literally my favorite member of Wu-Tang. You know what I'm saying?
Yo,
um
you know what? It's an interesting thing that you said that, because like, and it's crazy that Holden got that off and that you're building on, because RZA was that dude with his production being it so raw and not giving a fuck about how it sounded on an audio to an ear of an engineer. Like, to an engineer like Phil Spector, that shit would probably be a fucking nightmare. But to us as hip hop
right,
people, that grimy is fucking beautiful. And so, but
right.
there was something recently that I saw, like there's narration from AI and shit, because now they got the AI narrating and the voices,
Right,
and
right,
they
right.
said someone said there's like, what are plosives now? Like you can hear the P's, the B's, and shit like
Right,
that.
right,
They're
right.
replicating that down to a T to make it seem as if it's as authentic as it is and shit. Because those little slight errors and shit, or that those pops, you'd be thinking like, oh, all right, now this is a real person saying it. So it's interesting that we're saying that we purposely put mistakes in there, and then AI and trying to art imitates life, life imitates art type shit may end up trying to do
No, it's
the same
definitely
shit,
gonna do
yo.
that. That's why, like, I really believe that the people who are comfortable creating art live are going to be the most profitable commercial artists in the next decade or so. Because what will happen is this crazy saturation of AI art. I learned recently that in the world of OnlyFans, they are slowly replacing women who they feel are not willing to keep up with the content demands outside of the explicit material with AI versions of women, and it's working because the men are not really noticing or caring if there's a difference, and there are very realistic images and videos being created out there. So there will this be a demand and a replacing of human content creators, even full-on podcast. Right now there's technology that can read a PDF or a white paper you wrote and create a fully convincing podcast out of it. And for the pop audience and for a lot of people, your average regular consumer who will listen to a David Guetta song and not, they just want to vibe, they're probably not going to care too deeply. But there will always be that giant group of people in the underground that want that raw and authentic and want to know that it was created by real people and support that almost even more so because of it. So I do think that you'll have to be able to prove you can create your art, and that will become this new requirement that I don't think has ever existed in such a public way. But if you can, it's going to be such an admirable thing to this group of people that hate the saturation of AI content, that it's kind of a blessing, especially like CF, like you can just freestyle for like 100 years, like, so you go on a live and you prove that you're better in a sense than an AI, and it's like, it's not yet, but give it some time, and that saturation is going to work in the favor of the people who are comfortable being in the public eye like that.
You know what? I think now you're giving me an interesting concept for an album that I might just do an album called John Henry. Remember like the John Henry, the man against the machine, and the guy who was fighting against, he eventually died at the end. He beat the machine, but he tired out, and then he died from exhaustion. But it's kind of analogous to what is going to be between human competing against machine and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? And then it also ties into that John Connor shit. The whole shit may just be John. It may just be different Johns, Wands, John, this, that, and the third, but it'll all tie into like that.
Maybe the book of John.
Yeah, something like that, yo. Like it'll definitely have like John Henry, John
You could win
Connor
over
and
some
shit like
religious
that.
people with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, no, but that shit'll be a gangster ass fucking
I
perspective.
can interpret Lindell's question. So we have a question from Lindell, and he's basically been having this, like, we'll call it like 2 to 3 year long beautiful.
Oh, hold on. First off, hold on. Before we get there, right? We're gonna read all the comments that have been here, right? Shouts out to Lindell. He was the first comment. He said hi there.
Thanks.
And he mentioned Chino when you had mentioned Chino at the very beginning. He's been here for the entirety of this interview.
For sure.
Paying close attention to everything
Yeah.
that you're saying. Uh Chris Chrome CC jumped in, said hello, ACF is back, smiley face. Lindell, when you had mentioned FBA early on, said as far as FBA history, they're only taught FBA history without being taught the connection of FBA history to the Caribbean for the most part, which facts, yo. You know what I mean? Like that's definitely something that's been happening.
I mean, I do want to touch on that just if I could briefly, and I know I'll be going to these long ass tirades and shit, but when it comes to like
it's beautiful content.
When it comes to FBA, Foundational Black American, I can understand. First of all, African American as a group, as culturally, are extremely significant in the United States. Basically, foundation. I mean, one of the people to die for the American Revolution first was a guy named Crispus Attucks. I think it's Crispus Attucks, and he was obviously African American and indigenous, native. They created something that's more unique than through any which of the diaspora. Puerto Ricans, even though I'm white, I still have Black West African ancestry, at least 12%. Not like up there like my other counterparts and Puerto Rican colleagues and shit like that. But it's still in there, you know what I'm saying? That gene is still there, and it comes from Congo, from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Senegal, Mali, different regions, right? Because these people are unique people by themselves, but then they came here to the Americas, and they had to be fused as one people under the label of Black, right? Even though they're all distinct and different. And then come to the United States of America, or in this region, in the wilderness of North America, and be stripped of their drums, which is, for us in the diaspora, the drums are the heartbeat of our cultures, right? In Puerto Rico, we never lost the drum. We still have the drum. We have bomba, and bomba has 16 different variations. And if you look at Puerto Rico by its regions, when there was no infrastructure and there was no railroad, these groups were influenced by different, the first group to bring that style or African musical form to the islands was from Ghana, but different other Congolese and aside from the Ashanti from Ghana, the Yoruba, the Karabali, the Mandinga, the Wolof, the Mende, like all these other different people contributed and then created their own style. Then you have like the Haitians that went to Mayagüez, the people from the Danish Virgin Islands who came into the north, the people that came in from Barbados and other places that came into like Ponce, and they influenced these things, and all of this became so different and so diverse in a small island that's only 100 miles east to
East to
west
west.
and 20 miles north to south.
North to south.
So think
Right.
about that, and then think about in the United States that these people were stripped of the drums and then had to create their culture literally from scratch, right? And find
Scratch.
themselves, right?
By the way, that's a double entendre right there, because it was created from scratch.
That too, so it shows you like how innovative African peoples are, but specifically in the United States, that lack of resources,
America.
they created Black America, whether FBA, but however, whatever, Black America, extremely unique, different and distinct from the rest of the diaspora, because they actually created something without the drum and adapted polyrhythmic patterns to like European instrumentation. I mean, even Puerto Rican music, like our African music, has the rum barrel on it, and a rum barrel is still a European invention. It's not an African invention, but it has the same kind of, they just took, because it already had the foundation, right? They just added goat skin on top of it and played on top of it, just like Afro-Cubans could take a box and the cajon and then turn it to what it is and then create these different tones, which revolutionized polyrhythmic patterns, because they probably were sticking to like the tree trunks and the animal skin on top of it. And you got to see, like, making a drum, ain't no woke shit, this some real shit, is a spiritual tradition that back in the days in West Africa, in a village, a tree was chopped and probably that shit was prayed on to, and then, you know, the whole community would come together and these drums would be made in sacred rituals. Not all, but for some, this was a big thing. And to take all of that away, it was is devastating to a
If I'm not
community.
mistaken, just to like add to that, when we did the Maslaw interview, I believe he was touching on how, in addition to like how music was used was more as a tool of communication rather than a tool of entertainment, and that's a big
what Bomba
shift.
was.
Yeah, he's right,
Yeah.
because like Bomba, like a lot of the slave revolts, there were about 30 or some odd slave revolts throughout Puerto Rican history. And now you have to take in consideration the Haitian slave revolt that occurred, which allowed them to be free and then liberated the whole island, began because of a voodoo ritual, right? Which obviously involved a lot of drums, which is why in the United States, the Anglo-Saxon type of slave owners did not want that, because they know what that would lead to, right? They know that the drums would end up enticing people, causing different forms of communication or communicating one thing to another group. Because if these different African tribal groups speak in all different languages, the one language that they all understand is the drum, right? So strip
Right.
them away of the drum, and then you won't have any revolts or rebellions. I mean, I don't know how many revolts or rebellions were in the United States. We know about Nat Turner. We know about that. I don't know if there were 200, right? Not all are documented. But in Puerto Rico, for it being a small island where the slave population wasn't even the largest, Puerto Rico had a free black population. That's a fact, a large free black population, but not a large slave population. And slavery in Puerto Rico ended 10 years, roughly a decade, not probably 10, but like 8 years, or you could say roughly a decade after the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States, right? So that's another interesting fact. But the stripping of the drum was done on purpose. And so these people had to create something from scratch. And that's why their culture is distinct from ours. But I believe that when Puerto Ricans came in here, because our genetics is unraveling, because that's part of our gene, this West African component is a strong part of our genes. We come to the United States and we're living in the same impoverished conditions with African Americans. And some of the polyrhythmic patterns, though they're not playing it on traditional hand drums, kind of are similar to what we play. Like it's still there. Like in Puerto Rico, we had something called poesía negroide, which is black poetry, and people would kick rhymes on top of the drum. So this is something that's definitely from West Africa, transplanted in the Americas.
Which
The
is
only thing
something
is,
that these guys did. What's his name? Ali Back's ancestor. That's a part of the the
what, the last poets, or even
last
before that, right?
poets, last
Yeah, yeah.
poets,
So
right?
like,
The
and
last
they even
poets.
had Felipe Luciano as one of the last poets. This is before the
Yes.
advent of hip hop and all that shit, right? So they're
Before the
showing you,
Advent.
there's a solidarity within our communities and shit like that. But I don't think it's that FBA don't know that there's a Caribbean connection. I think FBA knows that um their culture is a phenomenon within the diaspora community, and that they just don't want their shit to be hijacked by other people's, like what happened with jazz, blues, rock and roll and all that shit. And they think that that might go the same way if like a large amount of Hispanics take it. So there's a paranoia, but there's validity in that paranoia because what happened in the industry prior. You know what I'm saying? And then
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans are mixed as fuck, and we hip hop is now went beyond the New York City, the Bronx. I mean, shit, back in the days, they say probably hip hop was bottlenecked in the Bronx, and some people in Brooklyn probably knew about it, Queens knew about it, but it definitely was a Bronx invention. It was a Bronx culture, and it was a
Yeah.
specific Bronx culture, right? So, like,
Specific,
you
right?
from the Bronx, my family from the Bronx, but they didn't stick around and see that aspect of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I grew up in it.
You already know. So
Being
you
born
you
in
know
1980.
there's something about a Bronx attitude. My grandfather was from the Bronx. The way he talked, I talk like that, even though I'm from Jersey City.
Yep.
And this is how the Bronx attitude is. Like, nigga, suck my dick. I don't give a fuck what you say.
Right.
I'ma stick to what the fuck I gotta say. And that's kind
Absolutely.
of what my grandfather. And you bottom line people. Bronx attitude is like, that's bullshit. You
This
lying.
is
I could
this is what
tell
it
off the
is.
rip. This is what it is.
You
That's
know what?
Bronx culture. That's what I
Exactly
learned
what you
from my.
just
That's what I learned from my grandfather. Like, we bottom line you. Stop bullshitting. That's
bottom line. You
baloney. Let's get to
bottom
the real thing.
bottom line and bottleneck, right? Because a Bronx
Yeah.
nigga will tell you these are your. I'm gonna take away what you just said, and I'm gonna present you the options of what I'm giving you to allow. And this is what you're allowed. You're allowed A
Right.
and B, and you could take this or you could suck my dick. And,
Facts.
and
So I
then
learned that from my grandfather, and then Jersey a little bit different. But I was raised by somebody from the Bronx, and
Right.
my grandfather still had a connection to New York City. Like, we didn't go to Disney World. We went to 40 Deuce and had knishes and looked at the buildings.
right.
That was my Disney World. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because that's what
Not for
my
nothing
grandfather
though,
knew.
to back up, what I do think though that Lindell is trying to say with as far as FBA history, they
Well,
only
he
taught
did
FBA history
say
without being
he's
taught the
right.
connection of FBA history to the Caribbean for the most part. Also though is that though there are a lot of young Black Americans who aren't being taught at all, and it's also what we talked about, right, with the young people revisionist historying things, right,
Yeah.
or kind of trolling, or this is whether whichever one of the three of our opinions of what young people are doing is right. It doesn't matter, right? It's a combination of all three, and the
Yeah, for
point
sure.
is that they're taking their time back and their ownership by being like, yo, I don't care what you guys said once upon a time. I'm telling you what it is according to me. And in that, they take a lot of history and they crumble it up like a piece of paper and they fucking throw it away in the garbage. And they're like, I don't give
Yeah.
a fuck about your history. This is what I'm telling you it is, and this is what it is. You
But
know what I mean?
that's that
And and
scary,
and, and
that what you're saying is right. That's that scary pseudo intellectual internet, misreading, creating mythos out of nowhere, Noel Harari type
you know
shit that we
what?
got
You know
going
what
on now.
though?
Shit.
That's part. I think that what that is really is just part of being young. When I was young,
Yeah,
bro, let me tell
is
you
it
something.
that different than
I
the
remember,
Illuminati
I
stuff?
remember, I remember
That's what
clearly.
I like, that
Check
ass.
this out. Check this out. I remember clearly growing up. in the 80s and the 90s, and like liking what I like, being told I needed to listen to X, Y, and Z music because it was right. Like I was told I had to listen to Rock Kim. I was told I had to listen to G Rap. I was told I had to listen to Kane. And you know what I did? I did none of that. I was like, fuck you, suck my dick, bro. I'm listening to Biggie. I'm listening to Nas. I'm listening to Hove. I'm listening to Wu-Tang. I don't give a fuck about the era that came before me. I give a fuck about my era and my shit. But and then as I got older, I matured more and I gave an opportunity to Rock Him and I listened to Paid in Full and I was like, God damn, why was this motherfucker so amazing? Why is this album so good still years removed from when it dropped? Why is this shit so fucking fire? What is this what was that track that it was just a beat? Chinese Arithmetic, I think it was
Oh,
called,
that
or
shit
something
is
like that was
so hard. Oh my gosh,
on
I
Paid in
listened to
Full,
that.
that it was just
Yeah.
that it was just a beat. It wasn't even Rakim
No
rapping on the
vocals.
track.
It's
Like
just fucking
no vocals. It was
fireness.
just a fucking fire beat. And I'm just like,
So
fuck,
good.
bro. I want to rap over this. And so the point that I'm trying to make is just, what I think it is typical, right? Typical of young people. Young people have a very like, yo, fuck you. I don't have to listen to you. I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I feel like it attitude. And as long as we stick around have some patience, they're gonna come around
Yeah.
eventually. They'll
Yeah.
they'll
Well,
they'll
I
they'll
think
listen to these interviews. They'll listen to the things that we said. My mother, when I used to come home, when I was a teenager, and I would come home, my mom would I would be high out my mind, and I'll be drunk, and my mom would sit me down at the dinner table at 2 in the morning, and she would feed me, and then she would talk my fucking ear off and try to like give me lessons of life and like be like, yo, you're fucking up right now and you don't even realize how you're fucking up. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I didn't really listen, but I didn't ignore her. And then as I got older and as I matured more, those lessons spoke to me in the back of my mind as like those memories that I had and things unlocked. And then I started listening more and more to the memories of the things that she said, and they applied more. And I think that young people will probably go through the same
facts.
thing. They'll eventually, listen up some, and they'll coalesce what they revised the history to be to what they learned from us, which is
Yeah.
actual history. You know what I mean?
Facts.
I mean, you
Let me
know
let me
what?
finish. Let me go ahead.
Go ahead. What
Let me
Lendell was talking
finish.
about.
Let
My
me
bad. Go
finish
ahead.
reading all the comments. Right.
No, because
Sofrito,
I know you want to. Yeah, because
Sofrito 2K. I just want to make sure that we always shout out
oh,
all
it's a
the people
fact.
that
We
comment
should.
in the. They're taking the time to be here and to fucking, you know what I mean, sit through our conversations. You know what I
Yeah.
mean. I want them to feel heard. So I always like to read the comments of everybody that spoke. Sofrito 2K came in and just said, "You're." Big shouts to
Facts.
your.
You're.
Um,
So yeah.
that's what I said back.
Woo-hoo.
Lindell
Bring that
said,
shit back.
I think what Flacco is saying is that they don't really think it's the best. Rather, they are just rebelling against what is said to be the best. When we were talking about young
Yeah,
people
yeah, young
Yeah,
and
yeah,
people.
yeah,
trolling, and
yeah, yeah.
and I think there's some truth to that too. He also said, Flacco and Holden, do you think I could ask him one of
Yeah,
our
okay, so this
debatable
is where we get to
questions?
the debate
And this is
question
where
where
we
he
get
has
to it. I say, go for it. He said, in just terms of pop radio only, how would you, CF, rate 80s pop radio when you were growing up versus the decades that came after, just in terms of pop radio songs only?
Okay, I think you
Damn,
need a
that's
little
some
more
deep shit.
no, hold on. The question's even more loaded because this is related to an ongoing beef because this is he asked specifically if he could ask a debate question. So that means you need a bit more context, I believe, to properly give Lindell the answer he's looking for. So basically Lindell has this theory where the 80s is the most impactful era for culture. This like Michael Jackson, like everything about it, and
That
that
shit was gangster.
no matter what's happened
Great
since,
era.
nothing
Nothing
will
will
top the
ever
80s. Well, ever. And
top
we've
the
gone
80s.
back and forth.
And it's
Flacco and
not
I
just, let's be careful. Hold on. He doesn't think it's just pop music. He
no.
thinks it's the music. He thinks the
Yes.
movies.
all of it.
are goaded. Which, by the way, I wanted to take the time, and now that I said movies, right? I want to take the time to shout out your T-shirt that you're wearing, CF.
Yo, dead ass. You
It's a dope
already
T-shirt, right? Periodic
Star Wars.
table of Star Wars elements,
Dead
right?
ass. I
So
fuck with Star Wars heavy.
you're actually speaking towards. I mean, technically speaking, they started in the '70s, right? But
Yeah.
I believe that
But the best movie that they had, Empire Strikes Back, was in the '80s. So dead ass. So that's already
right,
one to answer that joint. Where we're going. It's not only music. It's I grew up. I'm a Generation X. I grew up November 23rd, 1978. Right. So VHS kid, that tape shit.
And
Like
fashion as
right.
well,
He
just
says
to throw it
fashion
out
as
there.
well. He just
I don't know
added
about
that.
fashion and shit like that. I'm a '90s. When it comes to fashion, I'm on '90s obviously. So I'm stuck in that zone. Like I'd never. I'm when I'm stuck in the '90s,
He
homies. I
never
never left that.
stopped wearing baggy clothes.
Nah, dead ass. But like,
And
but in
guess what
terms,
though? It came back around. It came back
yo, dead
around.
ass. But like in terms of like, yo, dead ass. I go to this local supermarket. Sometimes I chill. You know the best place I like to chill with? I like to chill in the supermarket because motherfuckers be down to earth. The people that work there be down to earth. You get a real like reflection of how regular society works as opposed to the hodgepodge and the people that work in like finance or technology or data scientists. Like if you go to a supermarket and just chill with some regular motherfuckers, you gonna get just real down to earth people and shit. Like people that even jobs could be automated and shit like that. But this is a piece right there, like of authentic human beings and shit, right? So on that note, the music that they play there is all 80s shit, 80s retro shit, right? And then some early 90s shit, you know, like uh what's that? Tracy Chaplin and shit like that. Remember that? I got a
Yeah.
fast car. No, that's 80s too. So, but like when you go into like 80s B, you gotta understand. And then again, there's nostalgia in there because my mother and father were together. Remember, they broke up in '86 or '85. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of shit that went on in the '80s for me. You know what I mean? Cause
Word.
I see a lot of. So I'm gonna have a bias. I'm gonna have a natural bias. But when it comes to pop uh, music, I'm automatically thinking from the underground hip hop stage. Like we wasn't on pop. We was anti-pop in
Right.
the '90s, and hip hop wasn't really pop in the
Half and
'80s.
half though, because
So
Kid Capri and these DJs would still incorporate a lot of
yeah,
pop
yeah,
things from pop radio
no doubt.
into hip hop
But
culture
but what I'm saying
and
is
what we
that
did.
those two worlds didn't exist in the '80s like that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And I didn't know if they did because I didn't watch like Mr. Magic or none of that shit. So now I'm where Lindell's at. Like, nah, the '80s was dead ass popping, and the pop was way more better than what was popping in the '90s, right? Because you got the Michael. Actually, pop became definitive in the '80s. In real shit, pop became pop in the '80s because that's when that whole
I mean,
label of King of
they
Pop was
had
in there.
pop existed from the Roaring Twenties in, but right, because that's what all that Rock and Robin
Yeah, all of
Kid
that shit. But when
type
it
shit
became
is.
something,
But
when it
it didn't
became,
become
But
ubiquitously
nah,
what we
say,
consider pop
yo, but
until King of Pop, like you said, Michael
yeah,
but
Jackson
no
and
no,
doubt.
all of
So,
like, but like
so
you can
like,
even think of the stars back in the day would be more genre specific. So there would be like a sense of pop, but it would be like the rock pop guys, and like it wasn't like the
yeah,
same
it
as in
was,
the
I,
'80s when you
in
get
this,
like global phenomenon, every
yes, that's
households,
what I'm saying.
right.
iconic, because they're
Yeah,
honestly creations, these iconic figures, like, right, like in the '70s they experimented with shit like Zeppelin, and
that's what they did more.
they tested it out, and that
They,
led to like the '80s creation of these Michael
exactly.
Jacksons
So,
and Billy
100,
Idols and all this shit.
I'm getting into that. So the mass manufacturing of what an artist was is what was the creation of pop, right? Because pop was specifically designed as, I think it was a way of entertainment. It was fun. There was less social commentary in some of the songs. Some of them was, but a lot of it was just a different. Where in the '70s, and this is the interesting thing about the '70s, because this statistically, I think I might be wrong, but what I read in multiple like places or articles and just Google shit that I'm coming back, that the most classic albums known throughout recording history are in the 70s. You know what I'm saying? That's what they say. And obviously there was a lot of things going on in that era, Vietnam, this, that, and the third. But in the
Yeah.
80s, pop music, I mean, obviously you got Rock the Cash Bar and other shit, but a lot of the music that they was doing, We Are the World, that's one of them and shit, but a lot of the music in the 80s wasn't dealing with like social commentary and shit like that. A lot of it was like,
Right.
you know, it was it was more promoting like what commercial capitalism is and shit like that, or like consumer capitalism really. It was more, that's when they started getting this machine uniformed and shit like that. Then hip hop threw everything off because hip hop created a counter culture to that with underground. Even though there was counter cultures coming with like what the CB, you know, do for punk rock and shit like that, which was like,
CBGB.
yeah, CBGB. And these are, interesting enough, these are genres that started in New York, right? That's how dynamic New York
Yes,
City is and shit.
absolutely. Right.
But I'm saying like that was happening in that era. Even like in the 80s, salsa became more commercial. Remember, it went from salsa golden being
Salsa
aggressive,
was
and then it
created.
became salsa romantica in the 80s, B. Like, you see what was going on in the
Yeah.
80s? Like, they were,
When we were talking about when you were talking about Puerto Rican music and bomba and whatnot, I'm thinking about the fact that like in New York we created salsa, which then gets brought back to Puerto Rico. But like I remember my father telling me about like um Hector Lavoe and there was this very dramatic Latina singer who died of
oh,
like drug overdose. La
Lupe, whatever,
Yeah,
Lupa,
Lupe,
whatever, fuck, yeah,
and
yeah, I
yeah,
remember.
yeah,
She's from
something like that,
Cuba.
and how they were out in the parks in what would be the jams,
Yeah.
before hip hop, right? Because before hip hop is born, they were already doing salsa. So it's like, and I read somewhere that James Brown learned how to dance or incorporated some of his dance moves that he learned from um Fania All Stars.
Well, I'll tell you,
That go ahead.
like I'll tell you, getting all right. So now I'm gonna bleed my question into that the answer, but my answer into your answer as well. So it's gonna cover both, right? It's gonna encompass two. The first one, if you notice, like pop became pop because there was more advantageous for it was more for labels, industries wanting to make records and make people become popular, and in doing so, they took over whatever was the other sentiment that had to do with a social commentary that was counter to the narrative that the industry was trying to create, right? So that's what happened at that time. That's why music became more like fluff and all that, because it was an agenda behind it, but it made it more memorable, right? Because it made us think like, oh, this is a good time. But in reality, what it was softening our minds and not making us think subjectively and shit like that. That's what I'm thinking, right? Because you could even see salsa went from having hard social commentary in the 70s and things with it until like the soft button up salsa romantica, just talk about love
Right.
songs eras, right? Even though you
Yo,
got
Right.
like
wow.
my bad.
I
So
was
so,
just
so
listening to Buju Banton on Drink Champs, and he said the same thing was happening with the transition from reggae to
With
dancehall at the
reggae
same
dance
time.
hall.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like we're seeing that phenomenon now having happen in their genre and shit, but like around the time that in the 80s, it was less social commentary and it was more like just sell records. But then in now selling records, if social commentary is counter narrative
I think that
and
he's
and
saying that in dance hall and reggae it happened in reverse because in the 80s you still had Bob Marley and reggae really
yeah,
had message music, and then in the 90s dance hall
Well,
was
my
all about
understanding
like
was that the starting
if
of
I was a rich
dancehall and
girl, and you know what I mean?
yeah, no, but in
like
the
the
80s, you remember
transition was
it
starting
was
in the 80s is I
it
guess what I was
started,
saying.
yeah, that's what it, because it was the industry was moving in that direction where it was making everything cookie cutter, and this is where boy bands and menudo shit started to come out. It
Right,
was
true.
softening shit for some reason, and I don't know if that had to do with like the counter communist revolutionary type of rhetoric that normally would be associated with extreme leftist type of culture. Like what happened in Cuba, for example. Like look at salsa, the way how it became something a phenomenon, even though it's Afro-Cuban music, interpreted by Puerto Ricans because the Cuban players were no longer able to come to the United States due to the embargo that was imposed on them by the U.S. through the economic warfare, right? Because they became a communist country, and the Puerto Ricans were the ones left over to play the music. And when they played the music, there was a level of freedom in order to express themselves and talk about like hood shit that Cubans weren't able to do because the government wouldn't allow them to do, right? But then on top of that, they had access to the industry. They had access to the markets because the people that sold the most markets were in the United States. That's where the music industry was. And they were able to polish up the music better. So that's why that music took off, but Cuban music didn't take quite off. Even though Cuban music evolved and became timba and songo and all this other shit, it never quite took off like the way salsa, which is its offspring, became what it is now. And that's like reflective of the United States and the type of power it has and how the United States is able to drive what global pop culture is. And that happened a lot in the 80s. Like in the 80s is when it became, when Coca-Cola became really, I don't know what the fuck happened in the 80s, but they upped that shit up. And now Trump is trying to bring that kind of essence back in a weird way and shit. But that's
What's
all of that.
crazy is
That's all of that shit happened.
As South Korea is kind of taking on a global leader of soft power and cultural influence, because even America has been highly influenced by South Korea in everything. I'm not saying New York, but the general American public.
I wouldn't even know that. That's gangster that you put me up on that, because I'm so stuck on pigeonholed into this underground
think about
shit
like,
that I'm
the
listening to.
mukbangs, like even just mukbangs, people eating like that. That's some South Korean shit. The influence of things like anime, I know it's broader than South Korea, but like you see all of this like Asian influence in American culture to a point where even stuff like Cyberpunk is creating animes to promote their game. You know, like it's like
So
it has like this level, and it's also in the music. K-pop is so powerful that like
yeah, and it's not, and it's not like what can I say? It's not militant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Like in the 80s,
Yeah.
things were, hip hop was becoming most militant, but in general, hip hop wasn't pop culture at that time.
I
And
mean,
so
Right.
pop culture,
even right, like white lines and
yeah, they
broken
had like,
glass everywhere. There's very politically charged commentary. You know
that
what I'm
is true,
saying?
but it wasn't like everywhere, right? It wasn't, and then you had
Right.
some of that, but it wasn't like really super militant. The 70s, I don't know, 70s was a phenomenon and shit, because there was a level of people learning themselves, the advancement of recording technology. I mean, what, and then late 60s and like the hippie revolution, the love revolution, the baby boomer era, the fact that there was no competing um, nations against the United States because they were decimated, their industries were decimated during World War II and shit like that. So it led for us to be
Also,
a
the
official superpower and shit like that. Well, not, I mean, we were competing with Russia.
the population curves at that time, because like a lot of economics is related to just, is your population old or young? So all those boomers that are now old and draining were the young up and comers in the 70s and 80s.
Correct.
And a lot, so like it was just a different time altogether in the 70s, where there
I
was a lot
mean,
less
I think
suffering and a lot more resources to go around relative to people. So yeah, sorry, what were you gonna say, Flacker?
I think something that you mentioned, right, which are you, let me jump in with what Lindell's saying, and then I'll finish with what I was about to say. Lindell said
Yeah.
fashion as well. There was more going on besides Michael Jackson in the 80s. Punk rock was around the 70s, but it blew up in the 80s. Does he remember how big skateboarding, breakdancing, and biking was in the 80s? I do as well. He's right. The softening of pop music started in the 80s. It just wasn't overdone like it was in the 90s. To which I say, I agree. I believe that what ended up happening is right, like industry shit, like the same conspiracy theory shit that we have in hip hop, right? Like the music, the feds came in and told Bone Thugs and Harmony that they, sell out, blah blah, and all this type of shit. I think that it's not so much as I think that the 70s produced a lot of message music, and that's what helped fuel a lot of the revolution and revolting that the youth did in schools and in colleges across the country and across the world, right? That was influenced by this music, and in the 60s and the 70s, and then they saw the government probably went to the music industry, was like, you need to stop funding artists that are
Yeah, that
fucking,
ass.
you know what I mean, making this type of shit. We need you to fund the Michael Jacksons. We need you to fund the Princes. We need you to make this shit about fucking music, love, other shit, but not about no motherfucking messages. Because the last thing that we need is young people revolting. And when that goes away, your leaders go away. No more Malcolm X's. No more
Yeah.
Dr. Martin Luther King's.
Nah.
And then all those
There's
all
more.
those artists, all those artists that are from the message era are being phased out and sent to the back of the line, right?
Yup.
And now
And
we're
then
exalting all
Madonna's,
the
the
Madonnas
Michaels.
and the Michaels and the Princes and the, you know, and everybody and everything, right? Because it keeps on going. Because wasn't Boys to Men? Didn't Boys to Men start in the 80s? I
I
think
think
New
90s.
Edition,
90s. New Edition
Nah,
did,
that
you
right?
know,
was
New Edition was 80s. ABC was 80s.
El
Menudo,
New.
like you mentioned, was 80s. You know, there's a lot of, like, you know,
the same thing
the
happened to
industry
rock.
probably being influenced by
Yeah.
the government being told, you know what I mean? Like, yo, you need to
Because if you
cut
look at
out
it like
all this message shit
what you're
and
saying
let
is
it go
right.
back
What,
to you know, Rock and Robin, tweet elite, tweet, tweet.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I do not need you to be telling, oh, what is it good for? We do not
Yeah.
need no more of that. You know
Nah,
what I
but
mean?
look,
And
if you
we will not be, we will, I'll end it here. We will not be saving your industry when you start to flounder if this is what you're going to continue funding and making.
Gee,
We will
that's
only
crazy.
step in and help you when you know what I mean? I would
Yeah.
assume, you know what I'm saying?
But
If
I
we're
think
looking at it,
what I'm saying, even like rock, right? Because you obviously have rock, and then soft rock becomes more prevalent, like in the
right,
80s, and then definitely in the 90s,
hair
right? That's what
bands,
it is.
hair bands become
Yeah,
huge
all that
in
shit.
the
But
80s.
but then the internet came, and then the internet just created a whole, like, it's hard now through algorithms, obviously, but there's this large just explosion of info coming from all different sectors that I don't even think the industry could control that any longer. So now,
Mm-mm.
before it used to be cookie cutter and they had things uniform and they had things under control, but then the internet kind of undermined all of that. And now you just have a bunch of ideas, nothing uniform, just all over the place. And everyone has the ability to express themselves. But they control it now through a whole different type of, it's a whole different means of control, but it's just a little bit more chaotic than it was before, if that makes any sense. So like when you look at it, what's going on now is like, the fuck we don't even know where we're at. It's this is uncharted territory and shit like that. But I'm assuming
No,
the
I mean,
80s was that same way too and shit.
I think we're back at a awakening era. You know what I mean? I think that we're back at a, you know, point where, like, a lot of artists, you do have a lot of artists that are, you know, spitting a lot of message music, and there is a lot more. There's a return to locality. There's a return to supporting local, to influencing a local regional sound, right? I've been telling Holden this since we started fucking around, you know, and doing shit together, because he always, you know, as he learned about New York through our interviews and meeting all the people that I brought to the table for us to interview, there would be questions that he would pose, like, why the fuck does Montreal not have a fucking scene the way New York has a scene? You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
would always tell him that, like, you know, part of what makes a scene, you know, as somebody who's always been appreciative of other regions' music, right? Because I was never a New Yorker that didn't fuck with other regions. I was, if anything, I was a New Yorker that loved other regions. You know what I mean? I loved Cali music. I loved Southern music. I loved fucking Atlanta, Memphis, New Orleans. I loved every region, but like what each region brought to the table was their own thing that they were doing. Even right now, Detroit scene is blowing up, and it's blowing up with a measure of a little bit of like that Bay Area sound with mixed with the shit that they do in Detroit and their own flow
I
that's
didn't even
different
know
and
that.
a little bit off kilter, a little bit off on the downbeat rather than the up. And so um that's just to say every region right needs to support. That's the only way that you get your shit to blow up.
Yeah,
That's the only way that Atlanta got to blow up was by like being, hey yo, fuck New York, fuck Cali, fuck everybody else and what they're doing. We're focused on what we're
you
doing, and
know,
that's the only way that you get your shit to really
you
fucking
know,
and everyone all over the world is doing that more. You even look at Africa, right? And all the different countries in Africa, that's what they started doing. They stopped paying to bring American artists to Africa, and they started exalting their own artists from their
yeah,
own regions and from their
correct.
own continent. And then that's what like that
But
has
this,
spread all over,
I
and
got
people are more focused on their own locality,
every.
and you get more message music
You
in
know what
there.
I think? I thought that I used to think like that, but then with the advent of the internet, for example, back in the days, New York City, even Tupac said it himself. See, Tupac was an interesting hybrid, one would say, because he was a mixture of two coasts, right? Half of his life started in New York
New
City,
York.
right, when
Hmm.
he was 14 years old, and then
Even up to a certain era because it's Northeast. Because when he left New York
yeah,
City,
yeah,
he
he
went
left
to
to
Baltimore,
Baltimore, this, that, and which
and
is
then
still.
ended up in Oakland.
But what I'm saying, he was a phenomenon. Him and also Shock G from that's why they were cool with each other, because Shock G from Digital Underground
Digital
was
Underground.
also from Queens, like by
Oh,
Florida, then the
word.
Queens, because he used to be Shock Ski, then it became Shock G. He told about the evolution, and his was, you know, definitely East Coast. So that's why him and Pac kind of clicked together, because they both were East Coast, New York City type of
I didn't know that about Shock G.
individuals that lived in the New York, in the Bay Area, and it brought about a different type of personality. So then when he comes back, he starts to see, like, he tries to get back into New York culture, but it doesn't gel right because New York is fortified, insulated in its own self. It is a mecca, it is the creator of, and it spawned different genres, and it it brings things out and then it feeds in and makes more, right? So they stuck into the five boroughs, and he's like, yo, what the fuck, y'all small, like this is not. Then when he starts to see the backlash that he gets, then he starts saying, fuck that, now I'm really riding on some West Coast shit, and then does the whole drastic 360, this, that, and the third. Really marketing purposes, and the fact that he's fueled by his own anger, which I'm assuming that all of this would have subsided as he would have, like, if he lived on longer,
Gotten
because
older and gotten past it. Yeah,
there would have been a lot of reconciliation. But when he
I'm
came
pretty
up with
sure.
his Machiavelli idea and repackaged and rebranded himself, his idea was to counter New York City also through Death Row East by way of Jersey, because he even said Jersey's the new West and things of
Yeah,
that nature.
I mean
So
he has the Outlaws.
he was trying strategically to kind of like surround New York and then have
Right.
people in it. It was an interesting fucking master scheme, and unfortunately, he was taken before the
And didn't even get
manifestation
to
of
fully
that.
execute it again and running around with
Nah,
Tretch, which
I
is
mean,
one of the
but
strongest MCs that Jersey has ever produced.
not only that,
Is you know what I mean?
the last album that he heard before he died, because he was such a lover of the music that influenced him initially, was Nas's "It Was Written" album. So you know what I mean? A lot of people don't know that. Like he
Right.
was listening to "It Was Written" the day of his death and shit like that. So, but that's
Crazy.
one take. So that the internet took away from that, which is why like the internet started having us, because when hip hop was left New York City and went to other regions, obviously they adapted whatever sounds that they had going on, or people adapted the hip hop from New York to whatever their local sounds, their interpretation of it. And that's how you get all these different genres. Like you get fucking the
G Funk and in
the
Cali,
nah, the hyphy shit, right? The fucking
hyphy shit in
the
Oakland,
gangster shit, G fucking Cali, the
bounce music in New
the
Orleans,
beauty music from
booty,
there,
the Miami bass in
the Miami bass
Miami,
shit, right? And then
trap
obviously,
in Atlanta.
Hmm.
Damn, did we
I
lose?
think
Did we
I
lose
think
Sia?
Sia froze. Yeah. Well, looks like he's
Froze?
frozen.
Froze?
Froze,
Froze?
not lost, but froze.
Froze?
Hopefully he
Froze?
unfreeze.
Yeah, he'll
I've
be done
noticed
freezing
it
soon.
looks like the New York internet is better than it used to be based on my recent experiences. Or I guess he's in Jersey. But yeah, it just feels
Yeah.
like we've had less internet issues in general.
Yeah, I think I saw his eyebrow move. We should be getting him back any second now, hopefully.
Any second.
And then and when he finishes this thought, I'll ask him Lindell top three MCs, and I think we can wrap it up there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Oh, we
Oh,
lost
he's
him.
back. He's gonna come. He's
So
gonna
now
come
we'll
back.
wait for him to
He's,
come back,
he
and then
he probably knew that he froze, so he
yeah, he just
you
did
know
his
what I
shit.
mean? He probably heard us talking, like he was frozen, but he probably still heard us talking, and
Yeah,
just pay attention to the computer shutdown coming back on now.
there we
The
go. We got
computer
the little
shutdown.
update. You know, that's what happens sometimes when you run it for too long. But man, this was very insightful. Like I didn't really know what to expect because I didn't know at all. And I feel like we went on this giant history philosophy lesson. And it was a big journey, and I really enjoyed that.
Nah, we did like last conversation that we had with Legend CF Constant Flow. It was a constant flow of information, and I love shit like this. It gets me up in the morning. These are the conversations that I think bring value to life, and you know, um, this you'd be surprised what it'll inspire.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many little great moments in there, just really interesting. But just the idea, like census data, if it's all self-reported and it guides everything, and people hold it as like this canon of truth that is useful in debates, which you see online all the time. But all the data is arbitrary, as we learned in this very episode, with the Puerto Rico identity being flipped around. So like
There he goes.
inversely, yeah, he's back, and yeah. So it's just like just thinking about that kind of stuff always gets me kind of excited, because we just don't often. But yeah,
yo, my bad, my computer
Nah,
done
you good.
shut off
all
like
good.
crazy. But like, yeah, picking back where we left off, like, so Tupac exposed the fact that New York was bottleneck, and the internet just exploded the music to go into different directions, where people end up forgetting about where the origins of this music came from because they're so far gone into their own interpretation of their hip hop, and then it
Right.
becomes like, and then everything that happened in New York could be uh, just conveniently swept under the rug because now other peoples have their own mythos about the
Right,
origins of what
right.
they think hip hop is. And that's how
Right.
that's interesting about how that Norman Rockwell painting where one person says one thing and then something six and then something else and then it becomes something totally different at the end of that conversation than what it was from the first person, right? After 50 other people heard it, reinterpreted it, repackaged it, and then got their own interpretation of whatever that first saying was. And now we're back to where we're at. And so that leads us back to where Puerto Ricans are into this thing now, because people could be like, Puerto Ricans wasn't even there. Someone could just create anything, like, and say, we were
Right.
never there, we never participated, even though there's documentation, there's footage and all that shit. They can
Right.
reinterpret that, they can
And
pseudo
also
intellectualize that shit, and then it'd be like just swept under the rug and not even be known because
something
they're
that
now caught up in their localness of it. But in the exchange of it, since they're caught up in their local interpretation of hip hop, New York hip hop becomes the change because it has its own interpretation of what they think the new sound is from the influence that they're getting from others from the advent of the internet. So it's fucking bugged the
right,
fuck out.
right. True
You know
story.
what I'm saying?
You
So,
know what's something that I love to tell people, like in conversation about like this whole thing about like were Puerto Ricans there, were they not? Listen, that it goes back to the census thing, right? Like we don't do censuses. There was nobody at the first jams ever taking a fucking census of how many of the black people that were in the building were or weren't Puerto Rican. Because when you look at a black man like Tego Calderon or um like you know Worm from Friday.
yeah, yeah,
Worm from Friday is like Cuban. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you don't know that a motherfucker is black. There were wild people back then that would say, "Yo, I was hanging out with such and such. I didn't even know he
yeah.
was
Yo,
Puerto Rican until I got around his mother, and then he started speaking Spanish to his mom, and I'm like, what the
you know
fuck? You're
what?
Spanish? You Puerto
Dutch, you know,
Rican, bro?" And it's
Mr.
just like
Magic,
you
Mr.
don't
Magic,
know.
Mr. Magic is Puerto Rican or was Puerto Rican. He passed
Right.
away and shit. So
We don't
no
know.
one
We don't
knows this shit.
know. No one knows because no one was taking fucking consensus back then of like who out of all the black people here, which one of you are Jamaicans, which one of you are Puerto Ricans, which one of you are Haitians, which one of you are black, foundational black Americans. Nobody was doing that corny shit. We were in New York City, the birthplace of this shit. We were mingling because this is what it always has been, which is a melting pot of
Yo,
many cultures and many
you
people.
you said some gangster shit though. You was talking about jams in the park, right? And I just wanted to go revisit that because I forgot that you said that, and it's very interesting. Before there was jams in the park, right? Because we know that jams in the park on some Puerto Rican shit was people playing the congas, timbales. That's a jam in a park
That's a
with
jam
a
too.
bunch of people
Yeah,
having in.
absolutely.
So what was before that jam? Like what? Like no disrespect to FBA, but what jams did they have in the park? Was they playing jazz in the park? Was they playing like
I mean,
funk in
yeah,
the park? Was
they're
they
right
doing?
there. I could answer that, right? Because we groundwork operations worked the event for Summer of Soul, the Black Thought
I remember
documentary
that. Remember that
on
shit?
that
I remember
movie.
that.
Right, right. And that movie was about the year that white people had the fucking what was it called?
Woodstock.
Woodstock.
So they had
Woodstock,
their
and
own
it's and
Woodstock.
we had and the Blackwood, but the Black Woodstock also, by the way,
Spanish
had
people in there.
Spanish people there playing with them. And by the way, again, right, to remind people, Hector, my father was telling me about being at a jam back in the 60s that had La Lupe and Hector Lavoe jamming, and Hector was, if I'm not mistaken, still mainly focused with Fania All
Yeah,
Stars,
yeah, yeah.
and Fania was really about like Tito and Hector Lavoe, Tito Puente, Hector Lavoe, Celia Cruz weren't individual stars like that yet. They were still a part of the group Fania All Stars, and they as a group also, what was his name? Willie Colon
Yeah.
was the producer, right? Right. They were all a
But
part of Fania All Stars, and they're jamming in the park. And if these are the people who are also showing some, because let's be specific at what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that they taught James Brown how to dance. James Brown was dancing before them motherfuckers even
all
got
of
on the
that,
scene. But what I am
100%.
saying is that they definitely probably showed James Brown some salsa moves that he incorporated into his soul shit, which is like, yo, of course, why wouldn't you? When it's when the soul when the salsa shit has roots in Afro-Cuban soul, which is
Yeah.
coming from soul music, which is something that he helped birth. You know what I mean? The Godfather of Soul. So at the end of the day, it's just a remix of his shit that he's like, oh, y'all remix my shit. Show me what you did. All right.
Yeah.
Now let me learn how to do that shit. You know what I'm
Nah,
saying?
but
But the
like what you
point
saying,
being is that they were jamming in the parks
so
Right.
together
but
even back then
Also,
before hip
also
hop
just
but
was
like
born. We were
when
jamming together.
yeah.
Dell's throwing in with the comments that you can go back to the 80s and just clearly see that there were Puerto Rican people breakdancing alongside the black folk. and
Yeah,
that's
hell
just
yeah.
There,
well
You know
you could
that,
documented.
go watch 88 blocks from Tiffany's. You know what I mean? Or
but you
80
know what?
blocks from
I
Tiffany's,
think
or 88 blocks from Tiffany's.
this is what I think that
Whatever. But
this
that's
is.
all.
Yeah,
My
I
fault.
think what FBA is disputing is like what happened in '73, right? Because that's what they say the origins of hip hop. That's when officially hip hop started in what's that Bronxdale, right? Some shit like that, like
Hmm.
Bronxdale projects or whatever. But my thing is
No,
like,
now FBA is trying to say that it doesn't matter what happened in the Bronx, that hip hop was already born before then when you
but
had this dude
Yeah.
in the ballrooms
yeah, yeah,
doing
yeah.
things, and that if it wasn't for the South, that there would be no hip hop. And you know, I'm not mad at them for it. All definitely helped, but the truth is that hip hop itself was born in the Bronx in the 70s
You 100
specifically,
percent. But
and it wasn't born nowhere else
but
but
this
the
is
Bronx.
this
You
is
know
what
what
I
I
want to
mean?
say. Like this, there's a couple things you saying. Like I
This is gonna
I'm gonna
keep
say,
going in circles.
yeah, my bad, my bad. We're gonna keep talking this shit.
Now,
But if it got the bongo in it, it's definitely Afro-Cuban influence because that's an Afro-Cuban
right.
instrument. If it got the conga in it, it's Afro-Cuban instrument. Even if Puerto Ricans are playing, it's not Puerto Rican. That's Afro-Cuban instruments. Like it is what it is. And I know
Hmm.
James Brown got mad bongos in this shit, and they got congas in this shit. That's straight from Afro-Cuba. It wasn't created in the United States. It wasn't created in Puerto Rico. That's straight from that influence when Dizzy Gillespie met up with Chano Pozo and they started fusing those two sounds together. That started most likely in New York, right? But when you talk about the jams in like Central Park and shit like that, were there jazz bands jamming in the park like that? Well, motherfucker, because it's easier to bring a conga to a park and a bongo than it is to bring like a whole bunch of a fucking drum
I
set
mean,
and all. You know what I'm saying?
the brass band wouldn't, but I mean, I'm pretty fucking sure that, right, like that, because at the end of the day, it's always been a mixture of things. So Dizzy Gillespie can show up with his horn super easy. You know what I mean?
That
I
ass.
mean, there's a brass
And
band that
when you look at the Last Poets, when they were, I watched a documentary of theirs on YouTube, and they were talking about when they first had their first ever Last Poets performance. It was a jazz performing a band that was playing, and they told them to just play, and that they
Oh,
would go, and they just went over the band playing. You know what I'm
oh,
saying?
I. You
So
know,
yeah, no. You know what I'm
and
saying?
then
Like,
even like
certain
I seen Gil Scott Heron, right? He was I think he was living at LES at the time. I don't know, it was Harlem LES, but he was like, "Yo, I would come out here with these Puerto Ricans. They come out here, they start jamming with their congas and bongos, and then I start. That's how I got inspired." He
right,
said that himself. You know what I'm saying? So like, there's
right.
definitely a lot of intermingling, interaction,
All sorts of
exchanges.
intermingling.
But yo, I'm
Another one
definitely
that I'd like to jump in with and offer, right, is the homie Joe Cuba, right? Joe Cuba
and
has the song El Pito, right, where he says cornbread, hog maw, and chitlin, cornbread, pero papi, tú estás
yeah,
comiendo cuchifrito, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And that's a
yeah.
song that came out in, let's see, oh man, I'm trying to find the year, but if I'm not mistaken, it came out in the 50s. And that's just one of those songs that I constantly name to people, of where it's just like all he's saying in that song, right, is hog maw, cornbread, um, cornbread, hog maw, chitlings, cornbread, pero papi, tú estás comiendo cuchifrito. He's on the chitlin circuit in America,
Yeah,
experiencing black culture in the chitlin circuit, the only place that he can perform as an Afro Latino, right, in the 50s, right? And
yeah,
he's telling all the people that he's performing to, the black people, he's like, yo, bro, you're eating from the rooter to the tutor. Guess what? That's cuchi fritos. That is all that we do back in Puerto Rico. We eat the pig from the fucking rooter to the tutor too.
yeah.
From the front, from the fucking nose to the feet to the fucking pig fucking asshole. We are eating every single fucking piece of this.
Nah.
What I see is that we are the same people. There's
So
no difference.
what?
It's like a lot of the homies that were God Body would teach me, which was like, we all just got dropped
Yeah,
off on different boats in different
no
places,
doubt.
but we
But
all the same people that come from the same place. You
and
know what I
what you're
mean?
saying is interesting because the fact that the first fusion of like Latin or Afro-Cuban and and African American sounds with jazz. Started with like the Latin jazz, but then on top of that, it evolved where it was soul and Latin sound, and that became Babalu, and that's where you got Joe
Yeah,
Cuba, Joey Baton, and all them people. And people conveniently forget about that era and act like there was no interaction and fusion between the two groups,
Right.
and that not thinking that there would be an evolution, another step beyond
like
that.
La
You know what
Lupe,
I mean? So
La Lupe that I mentioned, right? Who's from Cuba. She's from
yeah,
Santiago de
she
Cuba.
lived in the
She
Bronx.
died, but she died in the Bronx,
That
right?
ass.
When it says about her like passionate performances, because that was the thing that my mom and my dad were talking about. How she used to perform and she'd like practically get naked and she'd strip and she'd fucking be wild, passionate and
Yeah, hell
dramatic on
yeah.
stage and shit, and that was real different. They had never experienced anything like that, and this is when my parents were meeting in the Bronx in New York City. And what it says is the covered a range of music from montoño, bolero, boogaloo, venturing into other Caribbean styles like Dominican merengue, Puerto Rican bomba y plena. It was all, she had a wide range of style. You know what I'm saying? So,
She's a
but
legend. I think there was a movie about her.
to say said that just to say, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. Like, yo, she was there representing all that. There's, I'm pretty sure, a contingency of artists that were along with her in Fania that were at the cutting edge of all that, that were also a part of the birth of hip hop. Because when hip
Yo,
hop was birthed, if we think that it came from that,
Right.
if it didn't come from the first jam with the legendary DJs, right? Then it came from that meeting when the gangs met up in the
yeah,
South
yeah.
Bronx. And either way, the point is that what was definitely there was a DJ and bongos. You know what I mean? Because we didn't have much, but we still had bongos and we still had fucking Latin people playing bongos on the drums and DJs playing records, and you know what I mean? Boom. The
You know what
the the jams are birth.
you know what I also heard? Like there was Raphael Pagan and a lot of other people that were doing like Babalu kind of soul, Latin soul type of vibes. And like Fanya did that because they started seeing that it was giving more influence than their salsa shit. And they like, nah, 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 nah. And that's when they started going back. And that whole genre died out. The only person that was able to keep that shit alive, and I don't think he had nothing to do with Fanya, but I don't know, I need to educate myself, is Santana, Carlos Santana.
Santana. Yeah.
Because when you think about that, you're like, oh, that's Carlos Santana sound. Bullshit. That wasn't that was Babalu. That was started by the Joey Boutons, the Joe Kubas, the Raphael Pagans, a lot of that shit that was sponsored by them, but they dubbed that. And then someone from Cali picked their shit up and then did something else with it. You get what I mean? And then
Yeah, Joe
he
Cuba
gets
is
the
widely regarded as the father of Latin Boogaloo, born in
right,
Harlem, New York in
dead ass.
1931. So
So
yeah.
and so it starts from that homie, but then Carlos Santana gets the credit for it.
Damn, legend. Hold on. Now I'm like, yo, we got to
Yo,
do a whole ass
this is
documentary
like
on the
y'all are like
on the Lilo, because this is because now
look,
I'm thinking about it, and then this is literally what we were just talking about with the Egyptians possibly having fucking, or
right.
motherfucking the cavemen possibly recording music on fucking pots and shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We don't know, but you know what we do know. What we do know that is not that long ago, which is all this shit. And all it
Right.
is the fact that people have never been able to attach that to this, to that, because they don't
But it's
have
also
any
like
informed.
from what I'm hearing is everyone on the FBA side is attaching the significance to a specific date and time, and everyone else is going, this shit's in a fluid continuum. I think that's
yeah.
Yeah,
my
not and
best understanding of the
even
debate based
FBA.
on what
Let me
y'all
tell you
are
something,
saying.
because I debate with FBA people on Twitter Spaces all
I
the
know.
time. Okay, and let me tell you something. I'm not like, I, even when they are coming at me crazy, I'm not. I tell them the same thing that I'm always say, which is like, I ain't your enemy, homie. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could fucking be mad at me for whatever fucking made up reason you got in your head. But like, believe me that I'm gonna be your ally at the beginning of this argument, and I'm gonna be your ally at the end of this argument, because we really are brothers. You know what I'm saying? And it's really just a matter of like us arguing about stupid shit that really is
Right.
not no. You know what I mean? And the truth is that if they are trying to pin the birth of hip hop on the artists that were dancing at the balls in the 20s and the 30s in the South, and doing the first breakdancing moves at the Cotton Club and on Sugar Hill, then the same way that that can be a part true and a part of the birth of the culture is the same way that these other Latin art forms and genres have also something to do with the birth and the culture. You know what I'm
I
saying?
mean,
Right.
And it's all correlated and related together.
Right.
You know
This
what I'm saying?
like
but
Nothing is, and nothing takes away. Nothing
but
takes away.
the beauty of Chino XL though is that he's a fusion of those two groups because he's half Puerto Rican and half FBA or African American. You know what I'm
right.
saying?
Word,
So
right?
it's kind of like that's another attribute, another perspective. I believe he's African American. I don't know. I think it's
Let's see.
African American or
I
Trinidadian, but I'm
believe
saying like
so.
it's another,
See.
like a take into like part of that fusion between the two groups that creates these cultures and genres. Not that as co-creators and shit like that, because you know what I mean. This is technically Black American music because we in the United States of America,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely,
the
and
first people that Puerto Ricans learned English from was from the people that they lived in.
the neighborhoods with absolutely.
Yeah, and that was
Right.
basically a large amount was that African American. So we are highly influenced by African
Yo,
American
Lindell
vernacular
had
culture
another
and all
So
that
yeah,
shit.
Lindell has
Lindell had
several
another
comments.
question. Hold on, he had another question for you, which was, I got to ask this guy who's his top three MCs. He
Yeah.
also said, I can go to 80s breakdancing movies and you're going to see Puerto
Yeah.
Ricans. There were Puerto
And
Ricans and
then
Spanish people breakdancing alongside
Yeah,
Black
hell
people.
yeah.
Even going beyond that, hip hop is not a monolith, just like all other music. There are more white people in their youth who are into Jimi Hendrix than Black youth who are. His music goes back to blues music. Should the white youth not play rock because it's a form of blues? Ha ha ha. But
Whatever
yeah,
works. Like to me,
who are your legend? This is a question that you
yeah,
asked
yeah, yeah,
many
yeah, yeah,
times.
yeah.
Who are your top three MCs?
I mean,
Or
yo,
yeah.
or
top the first.
Yeah.
who's your what do you call it? Mount Rushmore.
I mean, yo, we
Yeah.
put in three. He said three. I don't gotta put
Let's
four. I
run
could
Three.
put
three.
But
three.
Let's run
you can put
three.
a fourth.
I mean, if I put, Coogee Rap is up there. Redman, no,
Okay.
fuck that. Redman is up there first. First,
Yes.
Chino XL, Redman, Nas, and if I had to do a fourth, it'd be Coogee Rap.
Word.
And then you know
Like,
that obviously Big Pun,
no,
Black
no,
Thought
no. It's
is up there,
okay. It's
shit like
okay.
that.
It's okay.
It is what
You
it is.
named four super solid, right? Chino, fucking legend. By the way, I appreciate you going home for your first two picks. You know what I mean? You were like, yo, New Jerus first and foremost with Chino and fucking Redman. Which, by the way, all respect due to this day, a lesson that I keep in my writing, that to this day, I remember when Redman got Rhyme of the Month in the Source several times in the 90s, and he finally had an interview near the late 90s, and somebody asked him, how does he get, how does he write such immaculate verses that end up getting him verse of the month? And he looked at the cameraman. I always love Redman for always being such a regular, degular motherfucker, yo. And he looked at the cameraman. He was like, bro, I write one dope line and then I build the rest of my verse around that. And that's it. And I was just like, word, I am doing that. I learned from Biggie, I learned to make my first rhyme in my verse impactful. From many MCs, from Jay to Nas, I learned to make my from and Biggie, I learned to make my last bar impactful. From Redman, I learned that I could just write one amazing bar and build everything else around that. You know what I'm saying?
That's
And we
crazy.
learned from the legends before
Right.
us. You know what
I'm
I'm
gonna tell
saying?
you, if I had to put an anatomy how I look from it, obviously Redman and Jersey and Chino XL, because of the fact that these personality wise, they just straightforward, raw, East Coast, like the way how
Super
they speak,
MCs.
like regular degular, because that's how Chino was, regular degular. It's just in your face, it's transparent, it's matter of fact. Queens, because of that polished, like Queens just got that, like they got, you know what I'm saying? Like Nas is the GOAT, Nas is the god of CB, like that's already. Um, Brooklyn grimy shit, like and people that tell the truth on some Brooklyn shit, J. Rue the Damager, because he was really dead ass against that shiny suit era, and look what we got now. Look at the after
Yeah.
effects of that right now. The Bronx, big pun. You already know that's default. The Wu, Staten Island, Shaolin shit, and all that Harlem shit, Big L and all that. But really, I think a homie that's from up top that I like is Lord Finesse, but I don't think he from up there. Obviously, Immortal Technique, that's my nigga. He from Harlem and shit. Um, if I start looking at experimental shit, that Cali shit, like Freestyle Fellowship, them motherfuckers was nice. Hyro, they was nice. Like even
I
Kendrick
wrote
Lamar,
nice.
I think Kendrick. People don't know that Kendrick Lamar, the baton was passed on to him not from the Drakes and all of them people, because they wasn't doing experimental music from that point. The shit was passed on to him through the Freestyle Fellowships and the Hyro types, because they was doing that type of shit.
Right.
He got well, look,
They don't talk about that.
Drake was on before him and gave him an opportunity by bigging him up and then taking him out on tour with him. But at the same time, you know what I mean? He could have not done that, and Kendrick was still gonna end up being who Kendrick is. But
Right.
Kendrick did get looked out for by many people, right? Because TDE Top Dog is like old industry from Cali.
Right.
Dr. Dre put him on Aftermath for, you know what I mean? Um, uh, uh, you know, he was looked out for by many people, and like you said, Hyro and there's even other people on the West Coast as a whole who have looked out for Kendrick, and even right now, his moment in the sun of like beating Drake in a battle comes on the heels of having a DJ Mustard beat that DJ Mustard has been trying to get production to him for quite a long time.
That's
You know what I mean?
gangster. I didn't even like.
DJ
I didn't.
Mustard is DJ Mustard is like the epitome of the Bay Area sound. You know what I'm saying? Like he is the Dr. Dre of the Bay Area,
Yeah,
even though he's from LA. Um,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken, or he fucks with LA artists. He fucked with YG.
yeah.
Um, the point
See, I
being,
don't even. I don't even like my
Right.
Cali. My Cali vibes was like Hyro and Freestyle Fellowship, because back then in that time they was doing different things than even East Coast people. They were mad experimental with their flow. They were more free flowing with it, and it was more East Coastish, but it was their interpretation of what I thought was East Coastish, and that's what I thought. You know, was dope. On like on the South
Lindell has
shit,
one last question for you.
Yeah, no,
I got
Um,
I feel like
one more, one more
we could
thing,
what?
walk
yo.
run through
One more
every
MC.
I'm
One
gonna
more
say
MC. Nah, run through another MC. Give it to him.
in regard to the
I'm pretty
South
sure he's
shit,
happy.
in regard to the South shit, obviously Dre 3000 and them, but also Phil Mob. Like Phil Mob don't get the respect they deserve, and
Facts.
Killer Mike, obviously he dope as
Poison
fuck as
Pen
hell, shit
loves
like
Phil
that.
Mob. I fuck with Phil Mob. I
Yeah.
think all real MCs in the New York
Oh,
City area fucked with Phil Mob heavy. You know what I'm saying?
and yo, on some Detroit shit, Royce the Five, I
Same as
still
we,
fuck with.
same
I
as we
fuck with
fucked
M.
with
I know you don't fuck with M. I fuck with M. I think M
same as I
is a
was about
fair
to
nigga.
say. You went to the Midwest, and another group that we fucked with in New York City heavy was Crucial Conflict. Like they were kind of like a
Yeah, Chicago
Midwest
shit. Remember that? They
version
was
of
yeah.
Field Mob. You know what I'm saying? They
Oh,
had their
and then
flow.
you got
New York City is passionate love for all distinctive flows. New York was always gonna and when I say New York, Jersey's included in that because Jersey was the first by proxy of being the brother next door is always gonna have been the first ones. The same way that this shit was born in the Bronx and immediately got to Brooklyn, it immediately went from New York City to Jersey before it got anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? So like the appreciation that New York City has, and the way that New York City goes about its hip hop is definitely reflected in Jersey, and you can tell that by all of the flows that came out of the state as a whole from all of the rappers, not even just the most popular, greatest ones like Redman, like Tretch, like Chino, but on top of that,
Ransom too.
even the boom, even the ransoms. I was gonna mention Napoleon. I was gonna mention the Outlaws. You know what I mean? Like people like
Yeah,
shit on the Outlaws, but use a beat fighter, pop style taker, tell you to your shit. You ain't shit but a faker. I love
they
Biggie, and
killed that
I was
album.
riding. I was riding with the East Coast and the beef. But believe me when I tell you that when I heard him bust out that flow and be like, use a beat fighter, pop style, I was like, Porter, why is that so fucking fire?
Right.
Now
So yeah,
that Machiavelli album is a
we
classic.
we in the New York, New Jersey scene, we are appreciators of flows and original, distinct flows that hit a pocket heavy. So that's why
Right.
we appreciate shit like Field Mob. That's why we appreciate shit like Crucial Conflict. That's why we appreciate all the shit, the Hyro that hits a pocket the right way.
Even the new
So
shit, Rome
Lindell,
Streets, Joey Badass.
Rome
I'm
Streets,
surprised he ain't asked
South
me.
Rome Streets.
But Benny the Butcher. But I'm surprised he ain't asked me what's my best albums. Like I would have definitely like classic albums, son. I would have been like
I,
dumping
He
mad
had
like
his last
gems and shit.
question,
yeah.
which, by the way, Lindell, this
OC.
is your last question. You don't get another question after this one, buddy. I'm sorry,
And
because we do
let's
have to wrap
just
it up eventually. But
because
yeah,
it's
we're gonna wrap
yeah,
it up.
it's like
Um,
10:30, guys.
I was
one
I'm
wildin'.
like we could run through
one
all the
last
geos.
one last question. What from Lindell is what's your favorite movie from the '80s?
Yo, I mean, I
And
already
why?
said. I
And
said.
just the what?
And why movie or what movie? I mean, I
No,
said
what
Empire.
movie?
What
One
movie
movie
is your favorite,
and
and why is it
and
your favorite?
why? And the one movie.
80 shit, B. 80 shit. I mean, I already said the Empire Strikes Back before,
I was
dog.
gonna say that's not
Done.
it with the T-shirt
Is
you
that
got
it?
on. Nah,
Nah, B.
Legends
There's
like hold
mad.
on.
There's wait
There's
right there,
mad
B.
shit
Because
that
there's mad
happened.
80s. Oh. I. Aliens, yo. Aliens.
Aliens,
Yeah,
really? The
James
second one,
Cameron Aliens. Damn, that shit was
word that
fucking
one was
real,
fire.
bro.
Yeah,
That
nah.
shit still hard. Yo, I
Listen,
watched
if it
that shit
wasn't,
the other day. That shit still hard as fuck, B.
I watched that shit the other day too, and I was gonna say if it wasn't for that movie, he wouldn't have gotten the money to make Terminator 2.
Mm,
And come out with that
And
the
Terminator
Avatar
2
shit.
was his very first Terminator 2 was his first thriller, which is to say like the record-setting movie that
Yeah.
breaks all records of
Yo,
all time. Before Titanic, it was Terminator 2 that broke all the records. Then came Titanic, then came Avatar, and he had three of the highest grossing movies of all time. He is
I,
literally the Michael
I'm
Jackson of movie making.
yo. All I'm gonna say is this: be the essence of the militancy and that space age militancy that went on in that fucking movie is
Was
kind of
dope.
reminiscent of the fatigue wearing militant type of 90s boom bap hip hop shit that I feel happened in the 90s that was edgy and shit. The two to
right.
me got that kind of essence of that like edginess, and I could still play a J. Rule Sunrises in the East album and be like that shit's still dope, and I could still watch Aliens and still be like,
And
oh, that
it
shit's still
still
dope.
not
Like,
Right.
and that shit right. Yo, piece the video music box too. That has I mean,
piece
people,
to
we didn't
video
even get to
music.
talk that.
Piece
We
to
didn't get to talk that, but that's real
No,
too. That
you'll have
has.
to just come back again, right?
piece.
Because we can clearly fill more than 3 hours more than once. Now it's twice. And don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
it is really enthralling.
Nah, hold on, right? Because we're still not done. We're close there. We're almost at the finish line, right? But I want to ask, finally, right? Like, what is it that you plan on getting
Mm.
done at Boricua Bash? What is it that you know what I mean? What you planning on performing? I'm curious to know myself. Like,
I got 3 songs that I want to rock and shit. Really, like I got this shit called The Uninvited. I got this other joint um called Esau, and then I got this joint called BGX, and another joint called The Unseen. I mean, shit, I could even rock the verse for you off of one of the
you
joints and
you
shit
could
like that.
you could definitely like I told you, you could stay up there for a half hour.
I
You know what
know
I
you
mean?
gave me a half an
You're a
hour, so
head
I gotta look for.
you're a headliner. You know what I mean? So
I
you could
gotta
feel free to do you.
Yeah, I gotta go
Yeah.
out there and dig in my bag and do some other shit. But I definitely got 3 to 4 joints that I really, really, really want to rock. Crazy. I wish I could bring my homie Bombaloo. He could bring the like a drum and then rock on stage, and we could just end up like
Freestyling a little bit. That'd be
I
dope.
think bring
That'd
it
be
back to
dope.
the
Right.
way, bring it back to that griot African shit. You know what I'm saying? And show the essence that this shit, even in the Caribbean, whether it's in the Caribbean,
If
whether
there's
it's in West
anything I
Africa,
could do to help facilitate that, let me know because I'll pay for his cab directly from his home all the way to the venue and back
he
that
all the
night.
way
You know what I
far in
mean? Like,
Jersey, but he'll come through. I just gotta talk to the OG. Like he the legend. It's
yeah,
just
talk to him.
I've been busy as
If
fuck.
he drives and has his own ride, I'll pay his gas all the way, fill
Yeah,
up his whole tank. You know what I
he
mean?
got a
Like,
he got a he got a whip, but you gotta understand when if he bringing a
yeah.
bomba drum, that shit's big as fuck.
Nah, I already
Right.
know. I already know. I
But
already
I
know.
could talk to some people and they could come through there and we get it in, man. I told mad people about this. I'm really excited about this event.
Yeah, nah, I'm
Um,
excited about it because it's gonna show the full like spectrum. You know what I mean? Like when you look at the acts, you know what I'm saying? Like we're all very distinctly different, but it's all representation of that Puerto Rican flag. We have a reggaeton act. We got Zoe G who sings and does kind of like a popish thing. You know what I mean? I definitely do. Ryan Gennaro does like a more sing-songy rap, you know what I mean? Sings and raps, you know what I'm saying? I'll be there repping with Liddy Bros type of high energy, you know what I'm saying? Uh Shit, and then you do everything from boom bap to rapping over bomba shit, you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah.
gonna be a dope overall representation of the Puerto Rican flag and how diverse we all are, you know what I'm
And
saying? So
just gonna be there too and shit like
Jess is
that.
gonna be
And you know what I'm saying?
hosting.
So
Yeah, yeah,
it is that
nah,
shit's gonna be
it's gonna
dope.
be epic
And I rocked at that spot not too long
for the
ago
EO
for
dub. Yeah,
yeah, man. We had a real classic night that night, that ass like people don't understand like the history of I mean we could go into that. You already know like I got a fucking a treasure trove of knowledge in regards to the other side of hip hop that the forgotten renaissance that people don't talk about, and it's interesting from a Puerto Rican because even though we
Right.
like kind of a forgotten, we got all this knowledge that's not spoken
right.
about. You know what I'm
True
saying?
story.
So it's like if I had a platform to speak about that shit, like with
So
y'all,
we
like
could,
periodically,
Nah,
like
we
you
that.
could,
got a
we could.
platform right
No,
here.
you have a
We're
platform
gonna
right
do another
now.
one. Yeah,
Listen,
I
right.
definitely
that's
want to
what I
come
was just
on
saying before.
when I
So we
when
could. Sorry, go on.
what I want to do when I want to release this Chino's book album and then come back and like I don't know,
Yes,
like
do
probably
that.
get a
Let's
listening
do that.
party or some bullshit like
Yeah,
that.
let's
No,
do
Something
we
it.
could
light.
figure
I'm
that
down.
out
I'm
too.
down.
We're down
I'm
for
You know
that.
what
down
I'm
We
to do
could
a
saying?
listening
discuss
party.
also,
We did
but
that one
just
time for volume two. Oh no, it was I did that with Ill Answer, but
we could
still,
figure
fuck
out the
that. We could
logistics
do
of
it.
it. We
Yeah.
could have there's a lot of ways to play with that idea. As far as you coming back, it could be for straight promotion of your stuff, but I think just in general, like what you may not know or maybe you do is we had already played around with the idea of exploring these kinds of topics on a more regular basis and maybe add more value to what we bring by touching on this type of conversation that we've had tonight. So I mean, if you're looking for a platform to come and speak more on these types of
We're looking for
issues, we're looking
knowledgeable
for
people like you
people
to come
that
on the
can come through.
platform.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
definitely I
so
like
we
I mean,
could figure something out in the nearer future that maybe you had in mind to have you come back on to come share more thoughts, because there's like at least 6 or 7 several things where you were ready to shoot off for another 30 minutes, which is amazing. So if we could, we can find those topics and structure them a bit, like we can honestly create like a master class of your mind, so to speak, by picking your brain over and over again and evolving the ideas. But
we'll do focus.
Yeah,
We'll do
I
focus content on specific topics, and you know what I
I'm
mean.
with that because you know, say we got general knowledge, but there's a lot of knowledge living in this area,
right,
living in where we see. I mean, Holden, you yourself is a pretty well put together individual. You process the
appreciate that.
information, and we able to really have a discussion there. I think this is a pretty innovative platform to communicate our ideas and then like shoot off each other, and then people see it and they themselves get intrigued by it
Facts.
without being compromised by looking for like sensationalist topics and shit. Just
It was
having
very
general
organic.
conversation. That's what I was saying. I think normally that's the beauty about human beings coming together and exchanging ideas is that it's something that we're not doing this because of the fact we trying to be
Right.
sensationalized shit. We're doing this just for the sake of the conversation. You know
True
what I'm saying?
story.
Facts.
So,
Yeah,
Shouts
and
that's
to
from
shouts to everybody
also
who
shout out
stuck
Lindell.
around
We
the
do it for
whole
Lindell as well.
Lindell, yo, Lindell was here the whole convo. I mean,
Whole
shouts
time.
to Bonnie, shouts
No,
to Chris Chrome.
yeah,
They're
all the
also
people,
both
but like
here. But
Lindell
like
is
Lindell
invested.
is
Like Lindell's, I've never
invested.
met Lindell. He lives in Florida. He's been around on my channel since 2017. He
Yo,
is
Lindell,
damn
watched
if you ever
every.
see if you
He's
ever see
consumed
that
over 1,000 pieces of content that we have put into the ether of life. There are
yo,
so
dead
few
ass.
people that are supportive like that
yeah,
in the universe that it's just like you have to shut them up because it's important. And when they ask questions, we got to take that seriously because they hear.
got it.
It's like they're like an extended family member at this point. But I do want to maybe like just kind of say we can continue all this in the future, but we also need to appreciate all the people who will watch this in the future. Also, thank you,
Yes.
CF, for coming tonight and being so gracious
Hell
with your
yeah.
time and your
Nah.
Word,
knowledge and
thank you.
everything.
I mean, like you gotta understand, like Dutch is my homie. Like you know what I'm saying. Flacco, as you
fact.
know him by, I knew Dutch for a while, and like we
Yeah.
we actually work together. We bust our ass
Brothers.
together. We working.
Facts.
We
He's one of my favorite people to work with because we keep up with each other, and I hate working with people
Right.
who like where I start working with them and I'm like, God damn it, motherfucker, keep up with me. What the fuck, bitch? And Legend keeps up with me. If anything, I'm
Right.
trying to keep up with him most of the times. And that's what makes for a great work environment is somebody else who's like pushing me to like be even
Right.
stronger, even better, even, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
yeah. We
Faster.
So that's
like you
why,
never had. You wouldn't have these conversations like other rappers don't be like, no, we actually do physical manual labor together. Like yo,
Right.
Facts.
you're not
Facts.
getting that because
Facts.
no one's embedded
Facts.
in the workforce. They're telling you, yeah, we went on tour together, we smashed bitches together, we did this.
Right,
But
right,
now we
right.
had to bust our ass to make money together
Money
and then
together.
had to install this particular fixture or
By
set
the
up this
way,
sound
though-
system or you know what
That
I'm saying? They're
Fort
not
Dix
talking about
Fort
that.
Dix spread was good money, bro. That
I'll
Fort
tell you
Dix-
something.
Yo,
Yo,
wasn't that check that
yo,
we got
son,
afterwards? The
I gotta-
the bus sale money after,
yo,
like amazing.
Yo,
that was
Holden, I gotta tell you something about when we worked at Fort Dix. I did not know. I'm gonna tell you about this, and just because this is a very interesting kind of situation, right? Groundworks had a government contract working with Fort Dix to set up or assist with the setup of the, I guess,
housing units for the Afghanistan
encampment for the
refugees.
Afghan refugees coming in directly from Afghan. So you see the planes bringing in. I did not know that that's what we was doing there. When I worked there, it was on the anniversary of 9/11, and I was wondering why the fuck we going to Fort Dix for, right? Because we normally doing jobs in New York City or marathon
Fort Dix
runs
is
or
pretty
things that.
deep in
I was
Jersey.
like, the fuck. And I come out there, I'm like, holy shit, this is history that's happening, unraveling in front of my face. Like, what the fuck? Mind you, son, I'm in Jersey City. I'm 5 minutes from New York City. I see the Twin Towers. I seen them shits go down. You understand what I mean? I was,
Right.
and all that shit happened because of the Mujahideen based in Afghanistan. 20 years later, fast forward, I'm on site of an encampment assisting creating the facility to house these refugees coming from Afghanistan. The irony, and it was on 9/11 when it started. But also on top of that, they wasn't paying us what they were supposed to pay us. Someone made a complaint to the Department of Labor, they started to interview people, and then our fucking rate went from $30 an hour to $80 an hour, and we got retro pay. Like, that was fucking crazy.
That's crazy.
Retro pay. The retro pay
So-
was what was the life change. There was some brothers that left out of there, had bad relationships with their baby moms. After that check hit, they had great relationships with their baby moms.
Yo, dead ass. I thought
and I
that was
feel
the
good
most.
about that. Like that type of shit,
That's
and
awesome.
that doing that type of job is like, it's life changing. There were guys that fucking left that job. They had fucking Range Rovers. They had fucking Challengers after that job.
Yo,
Like,
dead ass.
I was wild happy for brothers.
That was a
bro.
wild
Like,
come up, but it shows you like government expenses, what was occurring during even the Biden administration.
Right.
Like, these are things that we experienced directly, like
Right.
living in the New York City area. How many times you witnessed 9/11, which is a historical event, and then on top of that, you see the other side of it. Like, that's some shit that not a lot of people could see. That's an actual
lot of
song
people.
right there, shit. But that's some New York
Yo,
shit. That's some dead ass
That's
New
a
York shit.
fact. We could keep going forever and ever, and I feel like that's why you
We
need
got
to come
mad
back
stories,
in the near
B.
futures.
Mad
And you're
stories,
welcome
B.
to come back. So the next time it's convenient, I guarantee it'll be another 3.5 hours. That's all right. It's
Yeah, I'm with
beautiful.
that.
I
I mean, we
appreciate
had
you
some
coming
really-
through,
Big fact.
CF.
We touched a
appreciate
lot
it.
of topics and shit.
A lot of
Every-
topics. A lot of
lot of
important
topics.
I'm sorry it went all over the place. I'm sure that
it's
y'all can make it work
Nah,
or whatever.
no,
But
Legend, do not be
this
sorry,
is-
Legend. This is
Listen, this is why we're saying come back, because
yeah,
honestly,
exactly.
your mind is very interesting. The wealth of history that you have, like you're pulling up. Now, Lindell, we're not touching that. I'm sorry, we're not even touching it. Leave it alone.
Lindell's trying to keep the conversation going over there in the comment section. That ain't
I gotta
happening,
use the
Lindell.
washroom way
We
too
not
badly
talking
to
about
keep it
Diddy,
going.
bro.
It's not happening. It's
Yo,
we
dead ass.
good.
Turn on my AC.
CF.
I feel
You know
the
what?
sweat in
Maybe
my
on the
pits
next
right
one.
now.
Maybe on the next one. But
only
not on
shit
this
I'm gonna
one.
say
Yeah.
about Diddy is that J. Rule. Watch Diddy's no, not Diddy's album. Watch J. Rule's. Listen to J. Rule's second album. Everything he said was right. Everything was
Fair.
right. Can't stop the prophet, B. They were saying some prophetic shit back then,
Well,
and it's
now it's
happening
fine.
right now. It's happening right
So I
now.
appreciate
Sure.
everybody that's watching this in the future. If you do want to see us comment deeper on the Diddy case, leave a comment that says Diddy so that people wonder why that comment is in this. That would amuse me if that comment appears. Let's just run that.
Nah, do not leave Diddy.
Like it, share it, tell people about it, and looking forward to seeing y'all again in the future. We'll be back next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I believe we already have another interview scheduled. I'm scrolling up in the chat to
Ray
confirm.
Pearson
Yeah,
from
he's
Jersey. is
Oh,
gonna
that's
be-
the homie. He's gonna be there too. Dead ass. He
Yeah,
from
Ray
Jersey City, I
Pearson's
think.
also, also
That's
from
lit.
Jersey. We got a couple New Jerusalicans.
Yeah, New
that what I said?
Jericans. New Jericans,
Jericans.
basically. No,
New
but yo,
Jericans.
Ray Pearson originally from the Bronx though. Ask him.
Word.
We
Lit.
will.
We're gonna know.
There's
We're
a
gonna
lot
do
of there's
that.
a lot of people that they live out in Jersey City and Hudson County,
Originally
but they
from New York City. Nah, big
from
fact.
the Bronx specifically.
And so yeah,
Specifically,
we'll be
facts.
back next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to tell people about us, because honestly, your social validation is how we grow. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate you all, and live long and prosper, everybody.
Lit,
out
lit, lit,
there.
lit, 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 lit,
201.
lit, litty, bro.
I'm out.